First, I have to make some compliments, but before that, to say I cannot always say. I have to say that it's a special moment to me because there is a kind of a synchronization moment that we are living. This hotel has a deep connection with my family because my father worked here for 40 years as a receptionist. I'm from the working class and I'm very proud of it. And also because he brought to me the magazines that the tourists left in their bedrooms. And one of those magazines that always appeared was The Economist. And I became a reader from The Economist because of that. And it's interesting to be here talking about something that's very important to me, but to all of us here. It's the ocean economy, but a sustainable one that connects us all. And starting, by the merchandising that is distributed for you. So we have a bag that is soluble in water. So it's all sustainable. So it's not plastic, it's soluble in water, and it's biodegradable. The book that you receive is also made from plastic bottles. And the pen that you have is made from ocean plastic. So we try, the pen is still from metal, so we're trying to see what's in our merchandising, I would say, area, if we can, change a little bit of that, but step by step, we do to change. This can be, I would say, seem frivolous, but it's important. It's those collections of, tiny actions that, begin to change our awareness of the importance of a bigger change. Also, I want to thank, and Fórum Oceano to thank Savoy for the, all the support that it is giving us, to the regional government for all the support and believing in this area, for Instituto de Florestas e Conservação da Natureza, IFCN, to the Portuguese Navy, when Admiral is here, and for all the support that is given for taking us to the Selvagens Islands, and also for the commitment in making a more sustainable ocean economy through innovation, and also to the Economist, also to the support that has given to this venture. Also, word to our sponsors. Thank you, Frederic, from Nova Regent for your support, and also Zoritza for all your big support for making this happen for the UN World Tourism Organization, to the European Investment Bank, Mr. Miguel, to the Reef Company, thank you, Geronimo and Manuel for all the support, to Euromar, thank you, Jorg, to SDM, thank you, Mr. Roy Garibaldi, and last not least, to the Authority of Mobility and Transports, thank you, Mrs. Ana Paula Vitrin, for the support. How to find a model where you can finance the MPAs, the marine protected areas, like this one is very important, the Selvagens Islands, the biggest in the North Atlantic. How can we use market mechanisms, or market-based mechanisms, and market-based finance to finance what is very, very important for us, because we cannot monetize the ocean without having the proper protected ecosystems that gives us the life, the elements for our existence. The air we breathe, the protein that we consume, and all other elements, and also the beauty of experimenting it and seeing it alive. This is why we are here. Thank you for being here and share this, I would say, morning with us. And without further ado, let's now start the conference. Thank you very much for your presence here, and we'll see you soon.
O azul e o ouro são as cores da bandeira da região autónoma da Madeira. Azul, o mar, ouro, a sua riqueza. Significa que para um insular, proteger o mar é um cuidado inato. Significa que para o Governo Regional, proteger o mar é um compromisso. A Europa estabeleceu um plano ambicioso e a longo prazo de reversão do processo de degradação dos ecossistemas. Impõe-se colocar a biodiversidade numa trajetória de recuperação que garanta o restauro, a resiliência e a proteção adequada de todos os ecossistemas para o bem das pessoas, do planeta e da economia. Proteger o capital natural é um compromisso nacional. Governar para a sustentabilidade exige atitude. O mar, o sol, a floresta, a biodiversidade, a geologia e a paisagem escolheram as nossas ilhas como palco da natureza. A sua magnitude é motivo de uma estratégia política ambiental muito bem definida que conduziu à proteção de 65% da área terrestre do arquipélago da Madeira e 89% no nosso mar territorial. Governar para a sustentabilidade também exige ajustar a legislação e a estratégia sempre que necessário. A política de conservação das ilhas selvagens iniciou-se há 50 anos ao elevar-se a importância da conservação da natureza a um patamar que o país desconhecia. Meio século de inquestionável sucesso foi determinante para que a primeira reserva de Portugal tenha hoje um dos ambientes mais prístinos e alguns dos habitats mais bem preservados do planeta. A excepcionalidade das ilhas selvagens também lhes confere uma enorme fragilidade. As pressões climáticas e os riscos de perda de biodiversidade são desafios que não podemos ignorar e pelos quais a ação coletiva nunca foi tão urgente nem tão inadiável. Num claro exemplo de atitude política, o Governo Regional aumentou a área da reserva marinha das Ilhas Selvagens em 27 vezes e determinou o regime de proteção integral, comprovadamente uma das ferramentas mais eficientes para conferir resiliência aos ecossistemas. A ciência prova que resulta no aumento da diversidade de espécies e da sua densidade populacional, enriquecendo essas áreas e as áreas circundantes. A maior proteção trará também benefícios de cariz económico e social para o setor das pescas, para o turismo de natureza e científico, para a investigação e para a fruição pública. Para além da enorme importância geoestratégica que significam para o país, as Ilhas Selvagens ganharam protagonismo mundial. Exemplo para os mais exemplares, são a maior área marinha com proteção total do Atlântico Norte. O território a sul, mais longínquo de Portugal, a deixar mais próximo o compromisso de proteção do mar português. O azul e o ouro são as cores da nossa bandeira. Muito obrigada pela vossa atenção.
Este é de facto um momento importante. Nós tivemos ainda há bem pouco tempo a segunda Conferência das Nações Unidas em Lisboa sobre os oceanos e ficou claro por parte do governo português a importância dos oceanos, mas também pela afirmação do Sr. Primeiro-Ministro daquilo que são os objetivos que queremos atingir até 2030. Um desses objetivos era precisamente classificarmos cerca de 30% das nossas áreas marinhas protegidas. E penso que este objetivo e esta iniciativa da Madeira e este bom exemplo da Madeira é também um motivo de inspiração e é também este fórum um momento também de reflexão sobre aquilo que pode ser, do ponto de vista da economia sustentável azul, como diz muito bem Peter Thompson, o que é que nós podemos fazer em conjunto. Mas para isto, no âmbito do programa de governo, do 23º Governo Constitucional, temos que envolver todas as áreas nestes objetivos da economia do mar sustentável. Temos que envolver a academia, temos que envolver as empresas e temos que envolver a administração. Eu diria que há aqui um trabalho conjunto de concertação institucional, Mas há também aqui um trabalho conjunto de mobilização para fazermos acontecer. E é também com registro que vemos já um conjunto de iniciativas importantes. A última delas, e está aqui presente o Sr. Almirante Sema, a constituição da Zona Livre Tecnológica Infante Henrique, que é também um desafio importante do ponto de vista tecnológico de procurarmos ter em Portugal um espaço de excelência de experimentação, mas também de desenvolvimento de novas tecnologias ligadas ao mar. O mar, o oceano, é de facto um novo território. É um território que nós temos que ligar o nexo das alterações climáticas com o oceano. Porque é também neste espaço que nós estamos a contribuir para aquilo que é tão importante na contenção das alterações climáticas e também do aumento da temperatura no planeta. E este trabalho conjunto tem que ser feito nos diversos domínios. A começar pela investigação, e gostava de ressaltar aqui a extraordinária qualidade da nossa investigação, dos nossos centros de pesquisa e desenvolvimento, mas também do trabalho que está a ser feito por muitas empresas em muitas áreas. Eu digo que temos 3 áreas fundamentais para desenvolver num futuro próximo. As energias renováveis oceânicas são de facto muito importantes e este objetivo que o nosso país e o nosso Primeiro-Ministro afirmou também na segunda Conferência das Nações Unidas, de atingirmos os 10 gigawatts em 2030, mas também naquilo que é a transformação do transporte marítimo, o chamado green shipping. Cerca de 90% daquilo que são todas as componentes do trade internacional são feitas através do transporte marítimo. Temos aqui um enorme desafio. Um enorme desafio não só na transformação desta, digamos, todo este sistema, portanto, de transportes, mas também nos desafios industriais e tecnológicos que se vão colocar e que são muito importantes. Mas temos ainda um outro desafio, que são os alimentos do mar. Nós precisamos também de dotar a humanidade de mais capacidade de suprir a alimentação. E a aquicultura sustentável, e hoje, com os enormes desenvolvimentos em que Portugal também está na linha da frente nesses mesmos desenvolvimentos, nós vamos poder, estou certo, dar aqui um contributo importante. Por isso, caros secretários regionais, eu diria que estamos alinhados naquilo que são os compromissos internacionais que temos com as Nações Unidas, estamos alinhados naquilo que é o interesse nacional de protegermos as nossas áreas e o nosso mar, permitam-me esta expressão, muito popular, mas é isto também que nos identifica e que nos traz também a nossa matriz e a nossa raiz, também do ponto de vista daquilo que é a nossa tradição e a nossa cultura. I would also thank to the President of the Government, Regional of Madeira Autonomous Region, Mr. Miguel Albuquerque, for the invitation and congratulate the organizer for this event. I am completely convinced that the ocean is the land of the future in the coming decade. The ocean is scaled to play a central role in addressing major challenges such as climate change, energy crisis, degradation of marine ecosystems, or combating global pandemic and geopolitical crisis. Portugal holds the second largest exclusive economic zone of the European Union, which represents a great responsibility in the action for and governance of the ocean, but the European and in the global context. The national policy for the oceans is driven by the National Ocean Strategy that aims to enhance the contribution of the ocean to the country's economy, the prosperity and well-being of the Portuguese people, and to respond to the major challenges of the decade. In parallel, it aims to strengthen Portugal's position and visibility in the world as the ocean nation, able to ensure the proper balance between the health of the ocean and economic and social development. So to succeed in these objectives, it is mandatory to implement strategies to preserve the natural marine capital and safeguard the structure, functioning, and the resilience of marine and coastal ecosystems. The science and the facts already proved that the implement marine protected areas is part of a blue development strategy. Portugal soon understood marine protected areas' importance. It was in 1971, after the establishment of the first commission to set up the first Portuguese underwater park, Selvagens Islands Reserve was created. This marine protected area is therefore iconic and has a great significance. After 15 years, in the 2021, the protection of this sub-archipelago was reinforced. The marine protected area has been extended to the limit of 12 nautical miles, and all species found there are now fully protected from extractive activities such as fishing or aggregated exploitation. It is now one of the largest protected areas in the world and the largest in the North Atlantic, and sets a compelling conservation example for the other nations to follow, and the reason of the proud of Portuguese citizens. It's highly expected that the new Selvagens reserves contributes to the increased marine diversity, genetic richness, and reproductive capacity of the species, including those with commercial interest. This area will so ensure the integrity of the ecosystems, contributing to the better marine conservation of the entire Northwest Atlantic and promoting to the economic development of the Madeira Autonomous Region throughout their natural capital valorization. Selvagens Marine Reserve is a clear and a good example of how protection can be part of the region's economic development. So I take this opportunity to congratulate again the Regional Government of Madeira and stress out its audacity to go further ahead on marine conservation, figuring as a global understanding example. In this context, I recall the Portugal commitments to classify 30% of the national marine areas by 2030, reiterated at the second United Nations Oceans Conference held in Lisbon last June. At the conference, the head of the Portuguese government, António Costa, also emphasized the ocean's importance for the human species survival, and I quote, "We will only be able to deal with humanity's greatest challenge if you assume that the future of humans and the oceans are interconnected. But we should not be completely happy just outlining and declaring marine protected areas. Regulatory process must be followed by the good enforcement and effective management. We know that selvagens are far from the population island, but it's crucial to assure the effective protection, which depends on the good enforcement, management and monitoring, as well as a sufficient and a qualified human resource and the technology resource. And this recipe is mandatory for all marine protected areas around the world to succeed. And that's why this conference is very welcomed to address these concerns. The new future economically will really on business models that could base their competitiveness on the health ocean, and the health ocean depends in some point to set up the conservation measures. Today, around the world, there are many countries that already established sustainable ocean development as a national priority, aiming to attract investment from different sources, namely sovereign investment funds, development finance institution, philanthropic funding source, or private investment capital. This blending of a public and a private capital can be a catalyst in decreasing investments on the conservation and should be explored. As a final message, I would like to address an analysis commissioned by the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, Ocean Panel, that shows that every single dollar invested in the sustainable ocean solution yields at least $5 in return. We, as a society, have to understand that it's too much more profitable to invest in the ocean health than to try to solve the negative effect of your bad use. This thought must be a catalyzer for a sustainable blue economy. I wish you a very good conference with the profitable conclusions. Thank you. Uma boa conferência e bom dia de trabalho para todos. Muito obrigado.
Sincere thanks for the privilege of speaking to you all today on this vital topic. When I use the word vital, I mean it in its truest sense, which is necessary for life. And I'll get into that more in my remarks today. But firstly, I want to thank the organizers for their foresight and their perseverance. Cabo Verde was mentioned. I think we were talking about this way back then with Minister Vitorino. The subject matter, there's no avoiding it. It's of great importance and consequence for the world's ocean community. So on their behalf, I want to offer a hand of gratitude to the Presidency of the Regional Government of Madeira and as well to Fórum Oceano and to the Portuguese Navy and to the IFCN and the Economist's World Ocean Initiative. Secondly, may I say that what a pleasure it is to be back in Macaronesia, the islands of the fortunate, as the ancient Greeks so aptly called them. You may know that I'm from Fiji, which sits on the border of Polynesia and Melanesia, again, Greek-derived words. And as a fellow islander, I say to Madeirans, I suggest to you that you are indeed most fortunate to be the people of this beautiful island. For the warm welcome that you've extended, I say muito obrigado. On November 21st last year, a major victory occurred in the drive to protect the ocean's well-being. This date marked the Regional Government of Madeira's announcement of the creation of the biggest marine protected area in the North Atlantic, when it approved the Selvagens Islands Nature Reserves, MPA, extensively widening the protection of the waters of these remote islands. In an area bounded by 12 nautical miles around the islands, the Selvagens Marine Protected Area covers a territory of 2,677 square kilometers, with all species existing there and fully protected from extractive activities such as fishing and minerals exploitation. Now, I know you already all know this, but the speech is being made available to the media, so we'll get their facts right for them. This immense MPA will serve to increase marine biodiversity, the genetic richness of the biomass, and the reproductive capacity of the species therein. It also boosts the integrity of surrounding ecosystems, thereby contributing to better marine conservation throughout the Northeast Atlantic. And so first and foremost, on behalf of the ocean, I'm here to, in Madeira today to say again, thank you to the regional government and people of Madeira for declaring the Selvagens MPA. There can be no healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and the ocean's health is measurably in decline. In these challenging times, we have an immediate moral and empirical imperative to reverse that decline. And it's by moving forward with such measures as the Selvagens MPA that we will do so. Thus, once more, on behalf of a long-suffering ocean, I say to all Madeirans, muito obrigado. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the economy of the ocean is the 7th largest economy globally in GDP terms. But many of its sectors that rely on a healthy seascape are losing value under a business-as-usual management regime. Therefore, there's strong economic incentive to protecting 30% of the ocean in effective MPAs, and I'll say a bit more about that. In the islands of the Pacific, we're well aware of our responsibilities as small island developing states with large oceanic territories to attend to the well-being of our relationship with the ocean, as set out within the provisions of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, and indeed under the UN's universally agreed Sustainable Development Goal 14, to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources. As such, we have ample experience of the costs and benefits of declaring MPAs, and I'm sure that these are very much on your minds when you consider the Selvagens Islands Marine Protected Area. I'll therefore address these costs and benefits in what remains of my speaking time this morning. Let's start with the benefits, and I will begin with that moral and empirical imperative to which I've just referred. Based upon the very best advice available from the world's leading scientists, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has declared a red alert for humanity. He has told us in no uncertain terms that we've been waging war against nature, undermining the planetary support systems, life support systems, and it's time that we make peace with nature. And only the reckless, obviously, would want otherwise. So we must go to where the vast majority of the planet's living space exists to make that peace, and that, of course, is the ocean. To do the right thing by the ocean, we have agreed through SDG 14 that the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity is required. And the direct corollary of that decision is urgent identification, establishment, and management of ecologically representative, well-connected, well-managed networks of effective marine protected areas around the world. So while we're lagging in this work, the good news is that there is mounting evidence pointing to the huge benefits of MPAs, provided they are underpinned by effective financial support. It's also been conclusively demonstrated that the cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of implementation. For example, the high-level panel to which the Minister has just referred, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy on which the Prime Minister of Portugal serves. It's a group of 17 serving heads of state and government informed by leading global ocean experts and practitioners. It's commissioned a series of expert ocean reports, including one on the ocean as a solution for climate change. This report demonstrates that full implementation of just 5 ocean-based climate solutions could deliver 1/5 of the annual greenhouse gas emission cuts the world needs by 2050 to keep global temperature rise below that 1.5 existential 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming. One of these 5 solutions is the conservation of blue carbon ecosystems to prevent further release of GHG emissions and scale up restoration efforts. The report makes it clear that the most effective way of implementing that solution is through the establishment and effective management of area-based marine conservation measures called for under the target of SDG 14.5. In short, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, marine protected areas are vital to our survival. By preserving and restoring biodiversity and recovering biomass in the marine environment, MPAs generate these wide-ranging benefits. This is not confined to climate stability, for it's clearly proven that food security is another beneficiary. Think just of the fact that many of the fish species protected in Selvagens Islands move out of the breeding grounds of the MPA to where they're of significant commercial interest to the fisheries sector. In fact, food security is one of the main supporting reasons why more than 110 nations are now calling for the protection of at least 30% of the marine environment by 2030. 30 by 30. It's a massive challenge. 110 nations believe that that is the right way to go. With MPAs providing huge benefits as a public good, it logically follows that governments are their natural stewards and should therefore take responsibility for the governance and funding of MPAs. But this does not preclude partnerships with others in the execution of this responsibility, or indeed of creating novel means to achieve the desired success in governance and funding. Such approaches are more than appropriate and should be actively fostered and encouraged, particularly in the case of developing countries and in island environments like Madeira, with limited sources of government revenue. While we rightly expect the primary role in this field to be filled by governments, we should also recognize broader ocean users with their vested interests in a healthy ocean, justifying commensurate responsibilities for funding of MPAs. There's no doubt that meeting a 30% MPA coverage target will entail huge expenditure, but these are entirely reasonable costs with corresponding benefits for many sectors, from tourism to fisheries, from offshore energy to shipping, from healthy marine ecosystems to healthy coastal communities and cities. One study estimates the global cost of 30% MPA coverage as being somewhere between $5 and $19 billion US per annum. While that estimate may appear daunting, we should gain courage from the fact that over $20 billion US dollars of public monies are being spent annually in the form of harmful fisheries subsidies. These subsidies go largely to industrial fishing fleets, resulting in overcapacity, overfishing, and in some cases, illegal fishing. is it any surprise that 34% of global fish stocks are fished beyond biologically sustainable levels? Since the World Trade Organization's Ministerial Council has finally agreed, after 20 years of negotiation, has finally agreed to end these harmful subsidies, fisheries subsidies, let us all do what we can to divert the movement of these public monies into the direction of MPA funding. Think of such action not just as smart use of public funds for our self-protection on this planet, but also as reparation to nature for the damages done to marine ecosystems by our subsidies over the decades. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as an islander myself, I'd like to emphasize that at the moment, developing countries, often with very limited resources, host an outsized share of MPAs and bear an outsized share of the cost of their governance. Some of the world's biggest EEZs are home to the establishment of what could be the most environmentally desirable locations for MPAs. But some of the same countries are in economic terms amongst the least developed and poorest countries of the international community. Their scarce national resources are required for basic food services like health and food, security and energy and education. It makes no sense for us to expect them to forego licensing revenues from foreign fishing fleets, or indeed to meet the cost of governing enormous oceanic MPAs without external assistance. This quandary presents the perfect opportunity for meaningful, enduring partnerships and novel ways of funding MPAs so that they can be revenue positive rather than a drain on meager national resources. A recent cooperative study by the UN Environment, UNEP, in tandem with Oceans 5, Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Waite Foundation, and Oceano Azul in Lisbon, produced a discussion paper on marine protected area finance, status, and future directions. Their combined thoughts and efforts are praiseworthy, presenting a number of interesting initiatives in this field. And I'd like to highlight one of the study's outcomes because I believe it is worthy of multilateral action without delay. The paper proposes the formation of a global conservation trust fund, or an ocean sustainability bank, to draw in private capital and ensure equitable financial administration. In doing so, it proposes that the transfer of the funds to the needy regions I've just described must be efficient, with assurances built in ensuring resources get to where they're required for the offsets and effective governance. I believe that incorporating small fees on major industries would provide all the funding required for such an ocean sustainability bank. These fees would be entirely proportional to the benefits they receive from the ocean, and fair outflows from the fund, they would then go to the regions and countries bearing the cost of MPA creation and governance. A prime source of funding could well be international shipping. If shipping were a country, it would rank as the world's 6th biggest greenhouse gas emitter. If you drive a goods truck on a motorway, you pay a toll. And increasingly, if such a vehicle enters an inner city, it pays again. But ships sail on the ocean as if the high seas belong to everyone, and indeed they do, which is why international shipping should be paying a toll for the privilege of passage across our shared domain. I have spoken to representatives of some of the world's biggest shipping companies, and each of them agreed with me, admittedly in private, that the shipping industry would not even blink if a small toll were imposed across the board for this purpose. An ocean sustainability bank could well provide integrated financing tools beyond EEZs within area-based management in the high seas as part of the expected outcomes from the ongoing BBNJ conference. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. As the peerless scribe put it, on such a full sea are we now afloat. After the forceful push of the G7 ocean deal, with its determined commitment to end SDG 14's financing gap, and the strident call from the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon for greater funding of SDG 14 and the Sustainable Blue Economy, We must take the current while it serves. Carefully negotiated by the UN member states, the political declaration that was adopted by consensus at the conclusion of the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon states that innovative financial solutions must now be found to drive transformation towards sustainable ocean-based economies and the scaling up of nature-based solutions. To deliver on these undertakings, we have urgent work to do. Over the next 3 months, UNFCCC's COP27 awaits us in Egypt, as does the G20 summit in Indonesia and the CBD COP15 in Montreal. At these critical multilateral fora, let it be heard loud and clear that sustainable ocean finance needs an effective, well-resourced funding institution to do the work set out for us by the UN Ocean Conference's Universal Political Declaration. It should be understood by all that the time has come to move the climate finance needle decisively in the direction of ocean-based mitigation and adaptation. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, many other initiatives for the funding of MPAs have been put forward, and indeed some are already in practice. Time dictates that I just touch briefly upon them today, but I commend them to you for further discussion at this conference. Public budget allocations, tourism fees, donor-supported conservation trust funds. These are all commonly employed financial mechanisms for marine protected areas. The world's first blue bond was issued by the government of Seychelles back in 2018 with a view to supporting the expansion of the archipelago's MPAs. My own country, Fiji, announced a blue bond plan last year to raise $50 million US for investments to deliver a sustainable blue economy. So blue bonds have the potential to be good for the marine environment and good for coastal communities and good for the investors. And as such, they should be viewed as positive catalyzers for monetizing ocean economies with a sustainable business model basing their competitiveness on a healthy ocean. But they're not for everyone, and for smaller countries, blue bonds issuance poses limitations due to public debt issues. So around the world, valorization of natural capital is well underway. And I have absolutely no doubt that more novel approaches will be developed in our battle to meet the challenges of climate change mitigation and adaptation. Blue carbon, the blue carbon assets are amongst our greatest allies. Again, I'll use that existential word. They're absolutely vital to our well-being. I'm thus convinced that the worldwide drive for CSR, corporate social responsibility, and ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria, leading on to meaningful investment in nature-based solutions, will see the rational development of an international market for blue carbon. Indications are that this will happen in the near term, and frankly, the sooner the better. Before I close, I'd like to give a shout out to my colleagues at IUCN who are working towards the high ambition for the Impact Conference in Vancouver, and to my colleagues and friends at UNEP and their partners who are building an MPA tool and learning platform. And I know they're looking for support from interested actors such as yourselves to further develop a common, strong knowledge resource on MPA design and implementation for the global MPA community. So let's get together on this in pursuance of the Ocean Decade of Ocean Science and the UN Decade of Ocean Science and the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, to date, 2022 has been a very positive year for the implementation of SDG 14. From the outcomes of the One Ocean Summit in Brest to UNEA 5 in Nairobi, from the Our Ocean Conference in Palau to Stockholm Plus 50, from the Ocean Climate Dialogue in Bonn to the WTO Ministerial Meeting in Geneva, not forgetting the great forward surge of the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. And now we have this Marine Protected Area Conference here in Madeira today to add to the evidence of progress. From here, we forge on to the high-level week in New York next week, to the UNFCCC COP27 in Egypt and the G20 summit in Indonesia, and the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15 in Montreal. And not forgetting the International Marine Protected Areas Conference, Impact 5, in Vancouver in February. So in the build-up to COP15 and Impact 5, the outcomes of today's conference will better inform and mobilize us all. International mobilization is undeniably required. SDG 14's fifth target, to conserve at least 10% of coastal marine areas of the world, missed its 2020 marker. We now have only 3 months to go before CBD COP15 in Montreal convenes, where, if all goes well, parties will agree to protect, as I said, at least 30% of the planet's lands, rivers, lakes, wetlands, and the ocean by 2030. This agreement is vital, again that word, if we are to prevent mass extinctions and bolster our resilience to the climate changes that are upon us. The approach to COP15 in Montreal and Impact 5, we need runs on the board to show the world that we can do the impossible. Through 2,000 intervening years, the words of the Roman natural philosopher Pliny the Elder have been affirmed. How many things are looked upon as quite impossible until they're done. As a star performer, hosting the largest MPA in the North Atlantic, in what is a truly globally significant contribution, the Selvagens Islands have got it done. C'est Deus quise. I'll be standing in the Selvagens Islands tomorrow, witnessing in person the unsullied wonder of the Nature Reserve and its surrounding MPA. I look forward thereafter to beating the drum for the great consummation of the Regional Government of Madeira's Selvagens Islands Marine Protected Area. May its name resonate around the world as a paradigm to be emulated by the community of nations. Thank you.
The ocean is indeed in serious decline, I think. And we at the Economist Group have been worried about that for many years. We started our World Ocean Summit in 2012. We had one of our most enjoyable and fruitful World Ocean Summits in Portugal, in Lisbon, in 2015, and indeed next year. In 2023, Minister, nice to see you. We will be having a further World Ocean Summit in Lisbon and look forward very much to that. And I want to commend also Ruben and his team for organizing this. Thank you, Ruben, for being a lifelong reader of The Economist. I've really, so good to hear that. Thank you so much. Our summit is fundamentally about sustainability. It's about how we move the global community towards building and, in particular, transitioning towards a more sustainable ocean economy, because a lot of it is about a transition. And indeed, we know the three major anthropogenic challenges facing the ocean: climate change impacts, biodiversity loss, Peter talked about those, and indeed pollution. We've done a big report recently on chemical pollution in the ocean as another factor that fundamentally alters the way and the chemistry and the structure of the ocean. But I think also one particular area that we don't look at very much is this question of the further industrialization of the ocean. And that cumulative impact of human activities beyond the anthropogenic challenges that we already face, that add to the stresses that the ocean faces. And it's that sort of transition that we want to discuss, debate, and think about at the World Ocean Summit. And so in many ways, that's why it's both an honor and a real opportunity and a matter of considerable interest for me to be here today to listen to this and to moderate, hopefully, an interesting panel discussion on the Selvagens Islands, the Savage Islands, as they're called in English, and why we all need to know more about them. In fact, Peter and I were discussing in the car the fact that perhaps until this moment we hadn't really known very much about the Selvagens Islands, and now we have this great opportunity to do that. And not just why we need to know about this small and uninhabited set of islands, 280 kilometers away from here, and the largest MPA in the North Atlantic, but also how this MPA came to be, and how, particularly, as Ruben said right at the very beginning, how we utilize, how we bring market-based mechanisms and finance to sustaining this MPA, ensuring that this MPA works, and ensuring that it can provide the fullest protection that it's meant to provide. And so that's why we have, I hope, a very interesting panel. We have 9 panelists, a large number of panelists today, so we have 9 panelists, and we're going to hear from them really some, I hope, extraordinary, and I know extraordinary ideas and practical work that they are doing at this moment to discover and unlock some of these market-based mechanisms and financing for MPAs, and indeed not just for MPAs, because these matter also for the rest of the ocean too, but MPAs being a particularly important part of the discussion today. So we have 6 presentations, and I'm going to introduce very briefly each of those presenters. They're going to come up and make their presentation, and then there will be 3 other panelists who will join us on stage afterwards, and we'll then listen to what they have to say and then go into a discussion. We've got an hour and a half to 2 hours to do this. I hope we can get through all of that. So let me start straight away by introducing our first speaker, who is Paulo Oliveira. Paulo Oliveira is a board member of the Instituto das Florestas. This is going to my appalling Portuguese, sorry, e Conservação da Natureza, the IFCN. So, Paulo, could I ask you to come up and make your first speech?
My idea here is to give a brief presentation, giving you the background information, the baseline layer of information that you need to understand and to follow up this discussion. Umas palavras em português muito rápidas para dizer que eu vou falar em inglês. Não é desrespeito nenhum para os portugueses que estão na sala, mas sendo filho de quem sou, eu tenho a certeza que vão entender todos o meu inglês e tenho a certeza que não haverá problemas aí. É uma cortesia para os nossos visitantes e convidados. So, as I was saying, it's really an honor to be here. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, all the guests. Thank you. It's an honor, and I'm happy to be amongst so many distinguished guests and stakeholders, especially to speak about Selvagens. Selvagens means a lot to me. I've been working in Selvagens for the last 30-something years. I've had very interesting days in Selvagens. This is where we're going to have lunch tomorrow. Hopefully the weather will be a bit better. But I have to be honest and also have great times in Selvagens Pequena many years ago. So, but I'm not here to talk about myself and the good and bad times in Selvagens. I'm here to talk about Selvagens. A very well-known journalist, Paul Rose from BBC, once said, "It all started with a little bird, and it is funny how this story unfolds." Well, this story started 50 years ago, and I have 5 minutes to unfold it. In this room, everybody knows where is Selvagens, I believe, lies between Madeira and Canary Islands. It's composed for 3 islands, small islands, Selvagens Grande, Selvagens Pequena, and Ilha de Fora. This image here already highlights one of the main characteristics of these islands. It's their geomorphology. If you look at, it doesn't work very well, the pointer. Yes. If you look at this topographic map here on the top, and if we make a cut across that topographic map, you have this profile down here. And we can see that Selvagens is a volcanic structure that rises from the bottom of the ocean from 3,000 meters depth to 164 meters high. So Selvagens is just the tiny little part, the visible Selvagens are just the tiny little part of this huge, very important structure. This structure is very important geologically and also ecologically, because in a relatively small area, you have a wide range of habitats that are most of them in a very good conservation status. So it has a very high ecological value. But if we talk about ecological value, yes, it all started with a bird. This bird, Corici water. Selvagens has the largest colony in the world of this bird. It was hunted for many years, put into these barrels, and brought to Madeira in boats like this. As the boats were like this, the activity was sustainable. But with the advance of technology, and the boats get faster, quicker, more industrialized, the activity was not sustainable anymore. And this is the reason why in 1971 we created the first nature reserve of Portugal, the Reserva Natural das Ilhas Selvagens. On those days, the limits were the 200 meters depth, the bathymetry. But if we talk about the importance of Selvagens, yes, it all started with a bird, but it's much more than a bird. In the terrestrial area, we have endemic plants. Endemic means, for those not familiar with this word, exclusive plants. We have reptiles, and at sea, it was shown, and it was said today here in this room, we have pristine habitats. And it was the existence of these pristine habitats which led us to the next step. We looked for a new challenge, we looked for new opportunities, and we created the largest full protected area of the North Atlantic. The limits nowadays, it's the 12 nautical miles around the islands, which in average goes down to the 3,000 meters complex that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So we have a wide range of habitats protected by this new area. Which are our goals? And why we need, and this links goals, financing, things go together, but why we need extra financing. And I had to put extra in this image to highlight that we need extra to do better, because we have, and fortunately, we can't keep doing what we have been doing so far, but we want to move further. We want to do more, and we want to do different things to the world, to the region, and to the world. That is the reason the word extra is there. But anyway, the goals are quite straightforward, but I would like to present you very briefly. Obviously, and this is the core business, I'm not a money man. I think this is my core business, to preserve important, pristine ecosystems. With this, we will improve fishing activities in the surrounding areas. We also want to increase the resilience to climatic changes, to promote sustainable tourism. If we do better, the above ones, we can promote even better the sustainable tourism. This is a bit ambitious, and this is something that we truly believe that we have to do. It's to create a scientific hub down there at Selvagens. The last but not the least, we want to lead by the example. And this is very, very important in a worldwide perspective. So, getting to the end of this brief presentation, I took this from the description of this conference. So this is what we want to talk about in this panel. This milestone poses this huge challenge. We want to finance the necessary resources and infrastructures to do everything that I said we wanted to do, but we will also want to move further. We want to use this as a catalyzer for sustainable blue economy. This is my contribution to the discussion of the panel. Thank you very much for your attention.
Just one question.
Already.
I thought it was very interesting that one of the key areas that you were talking about was this question of improved fisheries around the Selvagens Islands. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about the discussions that had to go on with the fisheries communities in order to be able to, arrive at an agreement to fully protect the islands.
Well, you know that there is this wrong idea. Wrong wasn't the word I was looking for, but this not correct idea that the protected areas are not good for fisheries. So we know, and science has shown many times in many papers, many scientific papers, many people in places like this showed that the fisheries can really get better. Fish around the protected areas are more abundant, but much more than being more abundant, they have a better fitness. So they are better fish, so better food also to come to our table. The fishermen sometimes have quite have difficulty to understand this, but it was a smooth process. We had our colleagues from the Department of Fisheries articulating that with the fishery department, with the fishermen, the people that use that area to fish. But also I have to say that the fleet, the Madeiran fleet that uses, or the Portuguese fleet, including the Açorian fleet that uses that area, it's mainly to tuna fish. That is what is mainly fished there. Is what is quite residual in the total of the annual catches of them.
What I'm going to present now is the essential of the results of the study that we have conducted for the Regional Government of Madeira, and we've done it with IFCN, the European Public Law Organization, and the consultancy Very Impact. So if I can have the presentation, please. Very well. So here, what we did is to apply a quantification, a methodology of the social and economical impact, and related also in a quantified way with the ecosystem value, in order to identify what are, in a quantified way, to measure the impact, the main stakeholders that were impacted, then the main, I would say, areas that are strategic, and that can be the basis of new business models for finance the MPAs. Okay, so very quickly, so Fórum Oceano, we are the cluster for the blue economy. We have 140 members. We are a non-profit organization that focused on sustainable economy. We were one of the Portuguese stakeholders of the UN Ocean Conference, and we represent about 50% of what you can call the blue GDP in Portugal. And what we are focused is in fostering innovation for building a sustainable blue economy in all dimensions. In that regard, okay. So in that regard, we were very recently, now it's official, we were designated the managers of the Blue Hub network in Portugal. Many thanks for the Portuguese government, the Secretary of State, for the confidence that was put in Fórum Oceano to take this mission on. And what we're going to do here, we're going to manage and help to manage the network in finding a business model for these 7 innovation centers that will be located in ports in Portugal mainland. But also there will be similar structures, but we are also working cooperation here in Madeira at the Blue Hub that will be in Canção, and in the Azores that will be in the island of Horta. And here, why I'm saying this is that this Blue Hub network that we are, saying it officially by the first time, will work to produce the technologies and also to contribute to the business models for example, financing MPAs like the Selvagens Islands. And a final word, we're also full members of the new consortium of the Blue Invest platform. That is the instrument of the European Commission for financing the blue economy. So going to what we are doing. So step one. So what we identified, we used, a methodology that is in line with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So, and what we did, so we systematized what is the natural capital and the main ecosystem services of the Selvagens Islands MPA, and then we try to identify what are the benefits that are generated to people that are sustainable and others that are unsustainable, and the ones that are sustainable, how they can be market-based finance. So, what also one very core message: an MPA, mostly of the time, and still today, is perceived, and I can, in simpler terms, it's like having money in the bank that is frozen. It doesn't generate any interest rate, or a low interest rate, and it's an obstacle to economic development. So it was like Paulo said before, fishermen perceive firstly as an obstacle to their activity. In fact, what has is like a savings in the bank or a financial product that generates interest rate in the long term. It will generate a lot of benefits that will bring higher income in other dimensions and also in more sustainable fisheries in terms of value of what is fished. So what we did is, in an ESG perspective, to systematize that and also to say how can we change that perception. So we use the Common International Classification of Ecosystem Services. And what we see in the use values, so what can be used as a revenue source, we found the tourism, fisheries, research and science, and in the indirect use of the natural capital, the carbon sequestration, the education, and what we cannot use is being a biodiversity hotspot, a no-take zone, so all extractive activities that alter the ecosystem are out. And on the long term, but that is derived from the use values, how can you use some of the biodiversity for pharma and other applications that are not used in an extractive way? So what kind of services can really be provided? So fisheries, but outside the MPA, the tourism on site, but also virtual, and I'll be more concrete on that later on. The climate regulation, the biodiversity conservation here through carbon credits. I will dive deep on that later on. And also the cultural and dimension of the site. So what we did, we mapped the stakeholders, we did the materiality assessment of those stakeholders, and then defined what kind of KPIs have to be met for delivering that quantified value. So what are in a matrix that you cross the value of the importance of the ecosystem and the importance of also economic values, what we found is that tourism and fisheries are the main stakeholders where is most impacted by the MPA's natural capital performance. Then, in terms of step 2 of the materiality analysis, what we've seen is that in terms of services crossing these 2 dimensions, fish stocks, tourism, carbon sink, and the tourism on site will be the main, but in the bigger term, the remote will be the sources where you can generate more revenue without having or with zero impact in the ecosystem value and even regenerating. And we did also a thorough analysis relating this perspective to all SDGs of the UN that will be in the report that will be available in 2 months. So, in short, from a full rating of the quantified methodology that we have, is that we have about 50% of the value of the natural capital ecosystem of the Selvagens Islands that can be used for generating new revenues without having impact in deteriorating the ecosystem. What are those business models? Virtual tourism, premium tourism, carbon credits based on the carbon sink capacity, blockchain tokens for tourism, sustainable tourism services, and blue bonds emission. In short, blue bonds emission. We have here the EIB in the panel. This is, I would say, something that is done in Seychelles, like it was mentioned in Peter Thompson's speech. However, it has its risks because it puts pressure on the state's budget, or in this case, in the budget from the region, because it's it's a debt instrument. Virtual tourism. Using the power of digital, why not create a digital twin of the Selvagens Islands MPA, where people can have an experience either accessing it online, or you can have a dedicated building area in a science approach, where you can immerse yourself in the Selvagens Islands ecosystem, and you generate a revenue with that, because you have to pay to have the experience. Part of the revenue can go to the Selvagens Islands financing. Premium tourism. If you have Jeff Bezos and other millionaires and billionaires going to space, polluting the air with rockets, why not to create an experience of going to an MPA that feeds the planet, that sustains life, and make better use of the money that they have in building an experience that has impact and finance good for the planet. Carbon credits tokens. So here is the emission of carbon credits for market trading using a token blockchain system. We have NOAA, Regen, that has a partnership with UNWTO that is working on that, I would say, concept. Blockchain tokens for tourism services. So you can emit tokens based on the natural capital assets of Selvagens Islands, and you can exchange for sustainable tourism services. For example, like the Reef Company is building, has a solution for augmenting natural capital in the ocean by the engineered reefs. This is a way of sustainable tourism that can be financed through a business model like this. The revenues can go for to finance the MPA. So in short, what do we need for going further with this? We need a technological system that is, I would say, accurate in quantifying what is the behavior of CO2 and other dimensions in the water column, so that information can be auditable and support a financial product. We also see that was a solution, by the Reef Company and also by NOAA. But we can also, and we have to have more research and science programs to have more information that supports this kind of auditable information, quantified information for financial products. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ruben, very much indeed. And I think those 4 areas that you suggested could be potential market-based mechanisms, the blockchains, the remote tourism, virtual tourism, which I have to say I have a little bit of trouble trying to understand, but I think is really interesting. Of those 4 areas, which one do you think holds the most potential for helping derive capital, financial funding for the Selvagens?
I think here carbon credits, emissions using the blockchain system, but that has to have an information system. But we are very close to have that technological information in there. We have to have is the ignition for it, and the remote tourism, because it's very what the technology is fastly deployable, and there are a lot of, especially the new generations, they're all gamers, and they like VR experience, augmented reality, and so on. And this is a way of, in a practical way, generate revenue and also generate the awareness because they're being educated, and it's a fast deploying revenue source that will also give the science dimension. Having a digital twin is also an education tool and a science tool.
So just one more question. I think it's really, really an important question, because for a long time at the World Ocean Summit, we had looked at natural capital accounting. We'd looked at this question of how we use it, and it fell off the radar for quite a long time. And it's coming back onto the radar. In the US, for example, they are now looking at this in a very serious way as to how to sort of add natural capital into the ocean accounts that are there and being developed in the US. How important is it for us to do an evaluation of natural capital in the ocean? And how do we then use that to make decisions about how to manage our ocean spaces? And is Portugal, at this point in time, looking carefully at that whole process?
Well, that's one hell of a question. So, well, the EIB and the European Commission has the EU taxonomy. It's not perfect, like everything in the EU, it's not perfect around the world, but it's a start and it's usable. So you already have, I would say, a very good instrument. It's quite solid in many dimensions that is going to start to be applied and has the natural capital dimensions standardized. Because the thing here with natural capital accounting and other standards is, what is the standard that is credible, that everyone is going to use? The UN also did a very good job on it. So UNEP has done a very good job in doing the blue finance accounting standards and also impact measurement. So we are reaching, so in terms of standards, we are reaching there. But for that to be used, it's key that we have the technological information system on site that brings not only samples from the areas of the MPAs or from the ocean, but it can really bring us credible, real-time or almost real-time complete information that can be audited, and also helps to quantify the impact, and then the taxonomy, like the EIB taxonomy or the EU taxonomy, something that will be alive, applied, and will be a tool for managing value, and then help to make the decisions, and also put the money where it should be put.
And as you say, it's not just MPAs that benefit from this, but it's the entire ocean space that we govern.
Of course.
We have to do that in all those ocean spaces.
Exactly.
Yeah,
a ship owner to make a decision on that if it has the tools that really makes the business case, that it's worthwhile to change the technology for a greener one because it's profitable and it generates a positive impact of which you also benefit.
I'm super excited listening to the previous speakers about the problems that are being addressed. I believe that we have tried to develop a technology platform that is going to give society the opportunity to revitalize. The vision that our business has is to save the oceans, planet, and ourselves. I think it's very clear after listening to the previous speakers that without the oceans, there is no planet and there is no us. And I think for centuries, people have totally undervalued the power and importance of the oceans. The mission of our company is a small one. We are raising $500 billion to build 2,500 reefs of 50 square kilometers each, the size of New Zealand, trying to absorb all the excess carbon that is being produced today on a daily basis as blue carbon in an as naturally as possible way. When you listen to that task and when you think about the amount that we need to do this, it sounds impossible. But I think it's totally possible because the global ocean economy, as previously mentioned, could be classified as the 6th or 7th GDP on this planet, representing $31 trillion. So we only need 1.6% of that 31 trillion over a period of 10 years. So it's only 0.16% of the global ocean economy to achieve our target. What are we planning to do? We are planning to build a gigantic ocean ecosystem with NGOs, charities, multinationals, FMCGs, governments, to build these engineered reef areas. We call it an ocean backbone platform. What many people don't realize is that 50% of the natural coral reefs on the planet already have been destroyed. And coral reefs are responsible for 25% of the global marine biomass on the planet. 60% of the global population depend entirely on their food sources coming from the oceans, for example. The global population is exploding. The reef density is depleting. So we are seeing developments here that are killing the vital life systems on this planet. Now, for us to be successful in achieving this, we need to measure and understand what we are doing. Some people briefly spoke, I think it was Ruben, about the three musketeers that are trying to build a new planet Earth on Mars with trillions of dollars sending rockets into space. We have many companies at the moment booming, turning into multi-billion-dollar companies building satellite networks. Starlink, Planet Labs, and Spire, for example. What we are planning to build is a non-intrusive subaquatic ocean satellite network called Blue Box, together with our reef installations, where we are going to measure in real time a variety of ocean parameters in a global grid, in a global network. We will use edge computing units underwater with technologies that have been used for decades in the oil and gas industry, where we are going to measure visibility. We are going to record live footage from underwater. We are going to measure pH, salinity, temperature, nutrients, free oxygen, carbon, etc., etc. And all this data we are going to stream in real time into the cloud to get a real-time picture of what is happening underwater with the oceans. At the same time, we will use this technology platform to measure the efficiency of the sustainable reef concessions that we are going to develop to make sure that we understand how the oceans are evolving, how the ecosystems are either thriving or declining, trying to find out as soon as possible what the root cause problems are of these factors. Our business model is entirely based upon the capitalistic principles. I myself have worked for decades for multinationals in different types of industry sectors. And I believe that sustainability has to go hand in hand with profitability. If we can develop systems and platforms and technologies that are generating income and profit, I think there are no limits to the impact that we can have. In our strategy, we are not going to do this alone. We are going to do this with thousands of partners. We already have MOUs in place with companies like IBM, Microsoft, and some other very, very big players that are helping us to build the technology platform that we need. We have agreements in place with companies that are specialized in offshore deployment of infrastructure underwater, etc., etc. Our technology, together with the Blue Box platform, will be capable to help us to better predict weather patterns, disasters. We will be able to monitor ecosystems. We are going to deploy underwater laboratories for science and scientific purposes to help welfare on this planet, not only underwater, but also on land. We will have opportunities in the Blue Box platform for monitoring. So we can rapidly discover if certain entities are entering protected areas, fishing in zones that are not allowed to be fished in. And we will be able to identify, to connect with the IFCN, where many fish species, for example, are born. Where are they coming from? How do they move into the greater, wider ocean when they become mature? This is just a sample of examples of applications and service and product opportunities that we are developing. Part of our commercial model is 100% based upon blue carbon trading in a blockchain secured platform where we are going to develop an economy in the regulated carbon trading market. We are engaging with the EU on the regulated carbon trading market, and that will become a big source of financing for the reef installations that we are going to build, for example. Another example that Ruben touched upon was virtual tourism. A few years ago, I did a couple of virtual scuba dives in Singapore with VR goggles and special gloves. I'm a scuba instructor myself, so I dive a lot in real life, but I also was able to dive virtually. Now, there's only about 50 million scuba divers on the planet, and we have 7.8 billion people. What we can do with our technology is bring live imagery into living rooms of people, where they will have the opportunity to go scuba diving, even those people that can't swim and that are afraid to get wet. We believe that when we can connect people with the subaquatic life in a real-time way, it will increase society's attachment with subaquatic ecosystems. It will generate a plethora of commercial opportunities that we can bring to society that will enable us to continue investing in the reef concession areas that we are developing. And to give it a little bit more of imagination here, we have about 400 different designs of reef modules. These modules that we are showing here are Atlantic basic wave modules that we developed for the Portuguese territory. To give you an idea, this module weighs about 55 tons or 55,000 kilograms. And it sizes roughly 5 by 5 by 5 meters. One reef installation will comprise of thousands, if not tens of thousands of these modules. The modules that we are developing are made out of an eco-geopolymer concrete, which is a concrete that uses residual waste streams that are totally non-toxic. And we don't use, for example, chemicals and iron or rebar for reinforcement. We only use natural materials to do that. The recipes that we have enable us to build structures up to 15 meters high. And what we are doing is we are using habitat modules that are specifically designed for certain species based upon the knowledge that we have around the behavior of octopuses, sardines, herrings, sharks, and many other species. So depending on the region where we are deploying a reef concession area, we will use specific morphologies and specific habitat modules to deploy our reef installations. Here we have a simple example for ecotourism. This is a scuba training reef. Personally, I believe that anybody that wants to learn how to scuba dive should learn it on an engineered reef and not on a natural reef until people are totally comfortable and well trained to do this. This in itself creates a huge blue economy opportunity. We have had far-going conversations, for example, with PADI, the Professional Association of Dive Instructors, where we believe that we can deploy these training reefs globally to get people connected with the oceans and to teach them in a safe way how to scuba dive. Which projects do we already have in the pipeline? We have gotten fantastic support and interest from the Portuguese government, from all the different relevant departments in Portugal, the DGPM, IPMA, DGRM. I've met the minister a few weeks ago to talk about the projects that we have in line. And at the moment, we are looking at a variety of pilot projects in Portugal. Comporta, which is south of the remote is very stubborn today. Okay. Comporta, which is south of Lisbon, will have a 10,000 square meter pilot project where we will do R&D on the different morphologies and substrates that we have developed. It will be a permanent R&D test bed. Then we are going to build a similar one in Cascais, the city nearby Lisbon, which will be used for R&D as well, but also for scientific scuba diving and scuba dive training. We have been in various meetings here in Madeira to discuss potential reef areas together with the local government and Arditi, again, to test the technology and also to test substrates and morphologies. And we have two projects going on in Malaysia, one in Pulau Rawa and one in Seri Buat. And then on top of that, we have a variety of countries that we already have met to discuss similar projects to test our technology globally. Talking about financing, economy, and money, we have signed a term sheet with one private investor for $100 million US, just to give you an idea about the potential that this blue economy holds. And we believe that this whole organization is going to turn into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, self-funded, giving life and habitats back to the oceans and creating a complete non-existent blue economy. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerome. Can I just ask you just one brief question? And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much indeed for that presentation. Just one question. I mean, the model is, of course, a blue carbon trading model, ultimately, isn't it? So you're going to be using those reef structures as a way of understanding how to sequester carbon and so on and so forth. But my question is not so much about the trading aspect of it, but it's about the idea that, yes, we have done artificial reefs before. That's not unusual. But to do it at this scale is unusual.
Yes.
Is very unusual. And I wonder whether or not there has been any discussion about the scientific and the even ethical questions that sit there about effective carbon dioxide removal at scale through this kind of approach. Has that been a discussion that's gone on?
Yes, that's a very good question. We have established a independent, non-remunerated scientific board with doctors and professors to make sure that they support the direction of development that we are taking. We still have to do a lot of testing, obviously. So we don't preach that we already have an A to Z solution for everything. But the promising thing is that there's already about 30 sizable engineered reefs. I don't call them artificial because artificial for me is a little bit of a difficult word when it comes to the environment. There's nothing artificial about what we are going to do. The engineered reefs, there's already 30 big ones in Australia that have been in the water for 10 to 15 years at different locations. And these reefs have shown that complete desolated desert areas turn into underwater oases that attract flora and fauna, microalgae, macroalgae, kelp, and other carbon sequestering species. So our model is based upon that. So we will develop hubs with reefs. These reefs will attract life, and then in between the reef zones, we will repropagate seagrass and kelp areas, etc., etc. So we work together with partners when we develop reef concession areas.
I was invited by Ruben and Fórum Oceano because we have two fields of expertise. One is shipping, the other one is shipping data. So we are trying to combine that. And when we're talking about the protection of the environment, we need to talk about the polluters. And ships are definitely one of the main polluters of the main marine environment. So when we've been invited to present something here, I've asked my team to put something together that might give you a rough idea about what you can do with data today. So 2 years ago, we started to plan a green concept for the ship registry of Madeira. And one of the challenges we faced was that the EU Commission came up and said, you should reduce the emissions by, I think, 55% until 2030 and 90% until 2050. Now, the big question that we were facing was, we don't know, and we didn't know 2 years ago, how many emissions ships under the Portuguese flag are actually emitting. And we were talking to ports, and we figured out that none of the ports, not only Portuguese, but none of the European ports, had actually a clue about how much emissions are emitted by ships in their ports. That's a matter of fact. And when we are starting to talk about strategies, developing strategies, we have here the political leaders and representatives from the mainland, from the government, from the regional government, then I think it is very important that first of all, we need to evaluate and analyze what is the current status quo, how many emissions are actually emitted by ships calling Portuguese waters, sailing in European areas. And then we can develop, based on these analysis, we can then develop strategies of how to reduce the emissions and what measures we have and we want to take to reduce the emissions. Mr. Thompson was talking about a fee, for example, that the shipping companies should pay a fee. I will show it later to you. Basically, I agree to that, or the shipping industry agrees to that. But if we want to reduce the emissions by ships by more than 50% within the next 8 to 9 years, we will not be able to achieve that goal by implementing a fee. The more, and the statistic will show it, I will present that very soon, the most effective measure is actually speed reduction. And I will show you, maybe I can start already. So my team has prepared a presentation about a study that we have done. I will quickly talk about our challenge, which I just already did. I will introduce, quickly say a few words about how we get to this data. We quickly talk about the legislative path of the IMO, why the European Commission and how the European Commission is pushing for results, countable results and achievements. And then what we have done is we have monitored the emissions in Portuguese waters. So we have picked the year 2020 as a sample, and we have monitored all ships' movements within this year in Portuguese territory waters. So first of all, as an example, we have picked all the exclusive economic zones, the 3 zones that Portugal currently has, around the mainland, around the Azores, and around Madeira, and measured within these zones the emissions created by vessels. Then we have looked at the emissions from the macro to the micro. We have looked at the territory waters of Portugal, 20-mile zones. And then we have looked at the, as an example, at the emissions
created by ships in the port of Sines. And then I can tell you a little bit what we have in mind for the shipper district of Portugal about the sustainable future, about the green concept. And yes, so GMS and Scope Ship Review, these are the data sources. What are they doing? Basically, these companies, GMS is a Madeira-based company, a data company, big data company. They are tracking the ship's position of the world fleet of more than 100, I think it's 105,000 ships, currently over 5,000 tons, every hour. And then these guys are buying the data about the ship's engine size, about the latest and always the actual loading condition of ships. They buy data about the weather conditions of all over the world, and they buy the data of the currents and the conditions of the oceans. And from this information, the algorithms are calculating actually the consumption of each and every vessel. And from these consumptions, you can calculate the emissions of each and every individual vessels. And it takes even into consideration if a ship has a scrubber, if it has an open or closed loop scrubber, and all these other factors that matter. So based on this information, they have developed 3 scores, what they call scores: the environmental, the sustainability, and the reliability score of a vessel. And when we're talking about the environment, it does not only consider a ship, how much CO2 emissions a ship is emitting, it considers also what kind of measures has a company been implemented or not in order to make a ship green. I'll give you one example. Does, for example, the underwater coating of a vessel, is that a silicone paint that is environmental friendly, or is it some kind of chemical paint that is harming the environment? Or does a ship have devices to protect, like noise cancellation system, to protect the underwater life? So all these factors are counted in there, are collected, and then from various factors, one score is created. Why am I talking about scores and reviews? That is a language of rating agencies. So this product is done in cooperation with, is marketed and is overviewed by Europe's biggest credit rating agency called Scope. It's the same like Moody's or Fitch or Standard & Poor's in America. So European Union has the Scope rating agency, and Scope is rating all vessels of the world fleet. So further on, the system is monitoring the annual efficiency ratio, the AER, which banks and insurance companies are very interested in, and the CRI rating defined by the IMO, the carbon intensity indicator, and then byproducts are, they're calculating, measuring the emissions of CO2, SOx, NOx, and very important, of particulate matters. Why is it important? Because when we're talking about protecting the environment, we also have to talk about protecting people here. And Madeira, or also Lisbon, is a hub for cruise vessels. And for the people that live here, you don't have a real effect by CO2 that the ships are pumping out in the air, but you do have an extreme negative effect by the particulate matters that these ships are emitting. And these particulate matters are going directly into the lungs of the people that are living around the cruise terminals, right? So it's important to know which ships are green and which ships are not green. So this is just to give you a rough idea about how we measure points, or how the company is measuring the ship's emissions. Let me quickly explain you why Portugal has such important role for monitoring ships' emissions. You will see that Portugal is, okay, skip that. Portugal is based here. These are showing the main shipping routes that merchant ships are using. And you can see that along the mainland of Portugal, there is all the traffic, all the marine traffic from Northern Europe to Asia and back going through. Then through your exclusive economic zone is all the traffic from Asia to South America going. And through the maritime exclusive economic zone of the Azores, all Portuguese, is the whole traffic from and to Asia and the United States going. So you have here in Portugal such important role because most of the world traffic
from and to Asia is going through your waters. And this is why shipping, you have such strong shipping activities here in your waters, actually, and you have actually a lot of emissions created in your waters. So this is why it's so important to analyze how much emissions you are actually having here, and then maybe to develop strategies of how to control and even reduce these emissions by merchant ships. So I was talking about speed, right? When we're analyzing the emissions of ships, it is the same like you're packing up your car full with, either you're driving alone at economical speed, or you're making the car full with 4 or 5 persons and put a lot of luggage in it, and then you go full speed on a highway. You will see that the consumption in the later case is probably double or triple the amount that you usually can do. Currently, ships are absolutely loaded full. And because the charter rates are high, they're going usually at full speed. So that means that especially the container vessels of this world fleet are going at high speed, and they're emitting a lot of CO2 and other emissions. When we look now at the different kinds of ships, you will see that there are ships transporting huge amounts of cargoes, but they have small engines. Bulk carriers, for example, they go usually at low speeds with small engines. So one can say that bulk carriers in general are more environmental friendly than big container vessels or cruise vessels, because usually these ships are consuming a lot of energy, much more, for transporting a similar amount of cargo. So what I'm saying is we cannot just go there to ships and analyze the whole situation and say everybody has to slow down. You really need to differentiate and to know if a ship has a big engine or a small engine, and what actually impact that engine has on the consumption, on the emission of every vessel. Since we were talking here about the environmental zones of Madeira and the Azores and the mainland, I asked my team to give me it's a very precise overview about the emissions that have been created by ships in the Portuguese exclusive economic zone. And you see it's roughly 6.4 million tons of CO2 emitted in your waters in the year of 2020. Just to give you a perspective what that means, in the year 2020, we had COVID, full COVID time. So the Portuguese general CO2 emissions of the whole country was clearly below of the general one. So I think from the statistic I've read is Portugal was in 2020 emitting around 40 to 45 million tons of CO2, whereas in a normal year you would between 55 and 60 million tons of CO2 emitting. If you look at these numbers, you will see that what ships are making in your waters is approximately 10% of the CO2 emissions of your whole country. So this is the exclusive economic zone of Madeira, and it's just to show you, visualize a bit the positions of shipping routes that we are tracking. This is from one day, just to give you an idea where ships are passing by. Usually, and ships usually take always the same routes, because if they are on the way to the United States, everybody is sailing on the same corridor, more or less, right? So this is how it looks like. It goes very much in detail now, because I've asked my team to give you a rough idea about which shipping types are sailing which kind of, sailing areas, or let's say which routes, and how much the CO2 for that specific ship type was compared to the sailing distance they have done. So you see here, basically, as what I said at the beginning, container ships are sailing most of the shipping routes through Portuguese waters, and for sure, they are the biggest CO2 emitters in your water. Passenger ships, surprisingly, are very low. Why was that? Because it's 2020 and almost no passenger ship was sailing. Nowadays, the statistics would look completely different, right? So we can even go down to the specific ship with these data. So I can tell you, or we can analyze which were in 2020 the cleanest vessels, and we can even have a statistic and tell you which were the most polluting vessels in your waters. The most efficient ships, as you can see, here always the name Oldendorf. Why is that? Because Oldendorf Carrier is one of the biggest bulk carrier operators, and they have big ships with very small engines, which makes them very efficient. Yeah, I can go here to the port of Sines. This is, for example, one of the days that they have tracked the emissions in the port of Sines. And here comes now the interesting part of it. We were talking about the CII, the carbon intensity indicator, which is defined by the IMO. And you see on the part here, the different CII ratings. It is from A to E. And for example, for the month of May 2021, there were 54 ships with a CIA rating in the port of Sines, and 87 and 84 ships with a D and a E rating, which is the most worst rating you can have for ships. Now politics might decide and think about with these data, what can we do in order to improve this situation? How can we get cleaner air in the port of Sines? And you might conclude that ships with a D and E rating would either pay additional fees, environmental surcharges, things like that. Now, we have brought that up to the people running the port of Sines, or people running the port of Les Chaux, or people running the port of Rotterdam, and you always get the same answer. If we are the first ones to implement surcharges, environmental surcharges, we can certainly do that and we would see results, but then business would move to a competing port or competing country. And that is a real problem. So how do you solve that? You would need to go to Brussels and explain these decision makers in Brussels that European-wide, we will need a same strategy and everybody has to comply to that. If we don't do this, it will be very difficult to achieve results. Yeah, I spare you all these other details. Sustainability. So I've talked about CO2 and emissions and shipping, but being sustainable is much more than just talking about ships' emissions. So what we're going to do is, for the ship registry of Madeira, we plan to be certain front runners. So we have increased now in the last 9 years the fleet from 112 to almost 850 vessels, from 1.9 to more than 30 million tons. Portugal is today the 4th biggest ship registry in Europe, and I think in the next 2 to 3 years we are in the top 3. This is quite remarkable, and we see that there's a very positive feedback from the industry. And for sure, the more criteria we implement, environmental criteria, I would say a little bit less attractive we become. On the other hand, we believe very much in implementing strongly these measures, because when we're discussing the strategy for MAR, we concluded that we don't need another green award for somebody that has a green vessel. No, we need to be very concrete and precise, and we need to look for the next 20, I would say 15 to 20 years of where we want to go with the ship registry. So what we're going to do now is we are not only monitoring and evaluating the emissions for all Portuguese flagged vessels, but we will also come up with a very concrete strategy that we will introduce together with SDM to the regional government and ask them to implement measures for fading out polluting vessels. On top of that, we will come up with a sustainability concept where we will implement steadily a more increasing demand for compliance of shipping companies. So, for example, that could start with from the UN sustainability goals, we will ask shipping companies to fulfill 3 or 4 goals for the time to start, and then we will ask them more and more to fulfill 6 to 9, 12, and further on of these goals. What does that mean in shipping? I can give you an example. We will ask them to provide evidence to the ship registry that they have procedures in place for treating people the same, that they are providing education to the people, that they're paying men and women in the same way, things like that, that you simply should do in the 21st century nowadays. And we will be one of the first registries that is putting these measures or these sustainability goals into practice for the ship registries. So what could be done? We believe that data should be used to analyze further and based on the facts, develop a national strategy about decarbonization for ships. We would support an initiative in the European Commission for having a similar approach for all European ports to fade out D&E rated vessels from the CII rating in order to have cleaner ships calling European ports. I believe it is a very practical approach to think about establishing green corridors, especially in areas of Portugal, where we know that most of the whole world traffic and all the transported goods of the world are passing through your waters. It would be a smart thing to establish green corridors and establish rules and regulations within these corridors to tell the ship owners, well, you either go, you cannot, for example, sail at a certain speed, or we want you to pay a certain surcharge if your ship is polluting our waters, things like that. That is a political decision, not to us. We will implement the green concept for the International Ship Registry of Madeira still this year. SDM and us, we are working on finalizing the concrete terms for that, and then we'll propose these for the regional government to take the decision. And further, we would encourage the political decision makers to further invest and develop in alternative fuels, in building the port infrastructure for providing clean energy, because that is currently one of the biggest problems that ship owners are facing, that if they're in the shore, they would, many of their ships can take already shore-based electricity, but the shores and the ports are not ready for doing that. And even if you have a shore-bound connection here, Madeira would, as all other ports, for example, Hamburg, my hometown, they're struggling a lot now of how to provide enough energy on the point of demand from the shipping industry. That, I give you an example, if 3 cruise vessels are currently in Madeira, and each of them would be plugged in for the shore-based power supply, all the lights in São Martinho would go out. As a matter of fact, right? Because you cannot give the power supply to such big consumers at a time. So the industry needs to develop solutions for these kind of issues. And last but not least, I would say we need to use more data, big data for shipping, for the shipping industry, about analyzing, monitoring, and strategically using this data to reduce the emissions in shipping. Yeah, basically that's it. I know it's a lot of information for 5 or 10 minutes speech. I'm very happy to provide you with more information later about that study.
Jörg, thank you very much indeed. I realize we are really short of time, and I want to make sure that we get all the other speakers an opportunity to speak. The decarbonization of shipping does need to proceed much more quickly. I don't think, and Peter, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think your fee was about the decarbonization of shipping per se, was it? That really should be the task of a carbon price, in my view, or a carbon tax, in my view, which the IMO needs to decide on really quickly. But I see that the intermediate sort of solutions that you're suggesting here make a lot of sense, in particular, potentially for the Selvagens, some sort of green corridor, because quite clearly ships go backwards and forwards across there. Can I thank you very much indeed, Jörg, for that discussion. Thank you.
I heard one of the previous speakers saying that it was very exciting to be here. I'm very, very excited. As soon as I heard the first panelist, which was very interesting, inspiring, I may thank the organization for this initiative. Once Ruben came to me and asked if I would like to become a strategic partner and sponsorize this event, I directly said yes. And I'm very happy to be here because it's a high-level discussion on the blue economy. I came with no book, but if I may, I'm going to extract some sentences of the book of Excellency Peter Thompson. So I've heard about marine protected areas are vital, and I heard also that 110 countries are committed to follow the challenge of the 30 by 30. So I'm a very optimistic person, but I can tell that this challenge is very tough. It's going to be very complex to address unless we can help them incentives countries to get money out of marine protected areas. This could be a clearly game changer. So this is exactly the vision of NOAA, which I've created 8 years ago, which means Network of Ocean Ambassador Headquarters. The region term is for sure for regeneration, and it's all about setting up an ecosystem to kickstart the Blue Revolution. We are here at a kickstarting point of the Blue Revolution. I think there is some challenges to make it stronger, to make it more powerful, more concrete, and more impactful, and we need to do it in a regenerative way. So for this, I believe it was needed an ecosystem. Another sentence that I can tell is, without funds, we are going nowhere. So it was all about setting up a blue carbon methodology, a blue carbon technology that unlocked the market, which is truly a game changer for the planet. When I say the planet, I'm talking about humanity. Planet is going to turn around for billions years. Humanity, we're not that sure if we go the same direction. So basically, NOAA is, as I said, an ecosystem which wishing to address a carbon cascade mechanism, unlocking for sure the blue carbon credits. So for this, NOAA is now an international group. We have set up a company called Blue Carbon Lab, where we have invested massively to unlock technologies for the blue carbon market. So now we can announce that the first proof of concept reached 96% accuracy. So we now are able to analyze how did certify carbons sequestrated below the water, which was a big challenge. And the next challenge is how to trace, reinvest those carbon revenues unlocked into a circular economy for the transition of countries. So this is an ecosystem. We built a toolkit. The first part of the toolkit is a climate emergency legislation. So I'm traveling all around the world to help countries adopting those climate emergency legislation to make it happen, to attract foreign investment into their NDCs. Here I can say that Portugal is leading the way. It's one of the most advanced countries to push forward for the blue economy. The second part is how to channel those funds, how to trace it, how to operate blended finance in a very efficient way. So we are delivering a financial ecosystem. Then the third layer is how to value their natural resources. Here I'm talking about carbon for sure, and mostly blue carbon, as now we are able to unlock part of it. Then we can help them with a clean tech toolkit to find the best technologies and the most impacting ones. And we help them from the setup to the scale up, because at the country level, it's very complex to organize industrial projects for their transition. And all of it is adopting a blockchain traceability for making it transparent. Okay, so just an example about the climate emergency legislation. So it's how to fast track public-private partnership, how to unlock and reinvest their blue carbon and their carbon in general, how to enable blended finance, how to trade taxonomy, and we are dealing with blue nations, which are free zones for the planet. The first one have been adopted recently, adopting a blockchain ledger for the traceability, adopting strategic marine protected areas of natural park for valuing as much as possible their natural resources. So this is the way we believe blended finance can truly become a game changer and a multiplicator effect to de-risk private equity and to inject it into the circular economy of the transition. So first, we value the carbon market of countries. We unlock the blue carbon, which is estimated by ECDE of 24 plus $1 trillion markets. So if we can get it and inject it into the transition, it can be a game changer at global scale. So we value this. We issue the carbon credit as sovereign carbon credits. Then we trace this. There's a digital twin going into the blockchain to eliminate the greenwashing and the blue washing. And we trade it on a Carbon Next stock exchange only for carbon that are traceable. Then we are setting up the Global Blue Carbon Bank with an international banking license to channel those funds. And we, with the legal climate emergency framework, we ask the countries to reinvest 70% or less of those unlock new sources of revenues as junior tranche, first loss, everything dealing with technical assistance, due diligence, setting up pipeline of bankable projects, all of that pre-early stage financing that the private equity doesn't know how to invest and the banking system neither. So this is a de-risking investment where we can get the multiplicator effect. So Saritza, the executive director of World Tourism Organization, is going to introduce certainly the Climate Emergency Facility, which is another tool enabling blended finance with a higher level. And we have set up the Blue Climate Fund to bring private equity into the game. So this is the way we monetize carbon, and we use it, we multiplicate it, and we inject it with a traceability into the circular economies of the transition for countries. So let me introduce a bit the carbon cascade mechanism. So we call it Reach the Reef, where we help countries adopting protected areas, inland and waters, to where there is the most strategic capabilities of a carbon cascade. If we invest in carbon farming or reforestation into wetlands and areas that directly affect the ocean, in the same time, if we're able to audit the carbon reference states in the same oceans area, then we can get an additional credit with the same investment. But also we can audit marine protected areas of countries and get carbon credit directly out of it. So this is the way we can value at the highest level the carbon market for countries. Okay, so this is the blockchain platform that we are setting up, which is going to be delivered before COP27, announced at COP, which basically ends up with a QR code. So everybody will be able to scan it and to understand what is the project, who is the auditor, who is the certifier, what is the score, in ESG, SDG, carbon score. So everything will be traceable. How those carbons have been reinvested, what is the multiplicator effect, what is the impact of the project that are being funded. So, oh, sorry. No, it doesn't work properly. So for this, we are setting up with partners an NGO, which is going to be Global Ocean Trust Chain, GOT, which is the way to decentralize a governance with a blockchain mechanism, proof of authority mechanism, which is a platform as a service to digitalize the blue value chain at the global scale. So we have many layers here. One of them is one of our partners is setting up the UN Ocean University with 400 PhD from the marine ecosystems. We have a lot of toolkits here where the value chain will be able to plug, ask for services, and this is going to be the platform unlocking the blue carbon credit. We're going to call it Blue Plus, in relationship with the Red Plus mechanism of UNFCCC carbon credits. So this is on the way, potentially also announced before COP27. So this is it. I'm very happy to be here, mostly because this mechanism is a game changer for highland states, which are large ocean states. They have a lot of areas on waters where we can get them value, new resources, new funding mechanism. This is completely game changer for them. So even I'm inviting Madeira and Portugal to consider adopting the Blue Plus into their NDCs and to move forward as a pioneer country for the blue economy. End of the presentation.
Thank you, Frederick, very much indeed. There's a huge amount to get our heads around in this. And I think for those not familiar with finance, this is quite a complicated sort of system of work. I mean, it is in essence a kind of blue carbon valuation and trading mechanism that you want to set up, which encourages countries to value the blue carbon that they already have and also incentivize them to develop new blue carbon resources. How would you apply this thinking to Portugal's ambitions for 30 by 30 marine protected areas? Because marine protected areas are a really critical part of this this whole equation, aren't they? How would you sort of think that question through?
Okay, so Portugal is a great example. It's a coastal territory with islands. So they have a lot of to value if they want to protect. So they have to adopt marine protected areas. So we have a really good example here, how they get out of this marine protected area today in terms of revenue just because they protect it. Nothing. So if we can monitorize it, not only Madeira and the marine protected area, but also all the coast, all the EEZ, where our technology can unlock this. I mean, this is a new, I said new revenue sources for the country that can be massive. As I said, the market is estimated roughly up to $24 trillion. So all of those countries, and Portugal is long coast area. So this is a possibility for them to say, okay, how can I monetize it in the right way? It's not only about adopting marine protected area, but then to regenerate, to protect it, to bring additionality in terms of biodiversity, carbon sequestration. So we bring the toolkit on the table for them to be not in the middle of the desert, so that we can help them to go step by step, and then said, okay, this is what I've done. If I didn't do it, this will be potentially the state of our oceans. Now I protect it. Please help me with the carbon credits. So if we can do it into carbon, sovereign carbon into their indices, it coming a very cool, I mean, very valuable carbon credits that we can trade a high value. And if they want to reinvest it properly into the transition of their economy, it's a multiplicator effect that is going to change the economy at the global level.
And I guess just as your observation about COP27, this idea that the countries that do understand and evaluate their blue carbon resources would then put them into their nationally determined contributions as a way of
well, I had other slides, but I didn't go through. But we have already signed countries. Right. One of them is Panama, that we've signed COP26. They are putting the blue carbon into their indices. We are starting to audit. We are going to start regenerating, showcasing the additionality, and issuing sovereign carbon credit out of it. So this starting to become, let's say, a race to unlock the blue carbon first, because we cannot go everywhere today, so we're going to go step by step. So
I am much pleased for being here today in representation of the European Investment Bank, and I would like to praise the organizers of this initiative for its quality, for the quality of the audience and of the speakers, particularly Fórum Oceano. I would start with a very brief presentation of the EIB in general, and then I will jump into the subject matter of today, which is of utmost importance for the EIB. The EIB is the Bank of the European Union. It was set up in 1958 together with the Treaty of Rome, and its shareholders are the member states of the European Union. Its mission consists of contributing through financing of valuable projects to the achievement of the objectives of the Union, which include support to SMEs, climate action, environmental sustainability, research and development and innovation, strategic infrastructure, knowledge economy, and so on and so forth. We are 4,000, based mostly in Luxembourg, our headquarters. We are rated AAA, so we have the possibility of raising money on the capital markets at the finest conditions, which we pass on to the beneficiary of our financing. Well, as a matter of fact, our products are more than financing. We used to say that we are about lending, blending, and advising. Lending means essentially loans, guarantees, risk-sharing facilities, equity, quasi-equity, in the latter case through one of our subsidiaries, which is the European Investment Fund, in which the European Commission holds 30% of the capital. We have 60%. And this is basically our equity house, as well as a provider of securitization facilities. Financing is about this. Then there is advising. We are also developing a service for technical services in order to help the promoters of the projects to identify the projects, to design the projects, to implement them, and to monitor them. Last but not the least, blending. What does it mean? It means that the EIB shall combine its money with money of other sources, particularly of the public sector. For example, we co-finance projects that also benefit from the support of the European structural funds. We are, for example, in discussion with the government to see what we can do in the context of the RRF, the Resilience and Recovery Facility. We have also a lot of mandates from the European Commission in order precisely to boost the impact of our transactions in certain strategic sectors. And when the previous speaker and also Mr. Thompson said that we should be creative and design financial instruments that basically put together the private and the public sector, this is exactly our main purpose right now, and our focus is to design financial instruments, for example, including first loss pieces provided by the public sector, which actually create the right risk profile, benefit risk profile, and that enable the leverage of private sector investors, which otherwise would consider the projects and the investments not valuable on a standalone basis. This is our bread and butter, so to say. So we are, of course, more than ready to actually design those financial instruments for the purpose of the ocean economy and for the purpose of creating a sustainable and clean ocean for the benefit of the planet. And by the way, that is why possibly I would dare to say that to a certain extent, and at least as Europe, but not only Europe is concerned, we have already the Ocean Bank, which Mr. Thompson mentioned as an initiative. We are the climate bank of the EU, first of all. We are very proud of claiming this status, and we deliver, particularly through the so-called climate bank roadmap. We are very active in the blue economy space. Let me just move on now to my presentation. I will skip this one. Let me go directly to this slide for the sake of time, because I understand that we are not very abundant in terms of time, so I will try to be as concrete and focused as possible, okay? So we were co-founder of the Sustainable Blue Economy Financing Principles together with the European Commission, the WWF, and the World Resources Institution. This was in 2018, and this is basically a set of principles that guide best practices of financiers in the blue economy and ocean areas. Nowadays, there are more than 70 entities who adhered to those principles, which are being consistently applied. So we are very proud of that. Then we launched also in 2018 the Clean and Sustainable Ocean Program, which includes basically two pillars. The Clean Ocean Initiative and the Blue SOS. SOS stands also for sustainable ocean strategy. Now, let me just indicate what each of these initiatives are. The Clean Ocean Initiative was initially created for 2 billion euros by the EIB, KfW, and Agence Française de Développement. And its main purpose is to finance projects that fight pollution, particularly plastic and microplastics pollution. This was very, very successful to the point that it has been enlarged successively. And now we have also Cassa Depositi e Prestiti of Italy, we have ECO of Spain, and from February this year, we have the EBRD, and the amount of financing committed by those partners was doubled to 4 billion euros. And also the period of implementation of this facility was extended to 2025 instead of 2023 as initially foreseen. This Clean Ocean Initiative includes also a window for technical assistance. We are discussing right now with the European Commission the so-called COTAF, which is Clean Ocean Technical Assistance and Finance Facility, which will provide money for as grants for advisory as well as for investment grants, precisely in order to enhance the bankability and feasibility of projects together with our financing and other sources of financing of the private sector. Then the Blue SOS. This was set up in 2019 for 2.5 billion euros. This was an initiative only of the EIB and covers essentially green shipping. And I really heard with a lot of attention what previous speaker said about green shipping, and we are contributing very strongly to ways of rendering shipping as well as port activities more sustainable and more clean, coastal management, and sustainable fishery, aquaculture, research and development. Research and development, we focus a lot on ocean monitoring and provision of digital services. Coastal management, our focus is on solid waste and wastewater treatment, because actually we need to ensure that things that are done on land, onshore, do not translate eventually in garbage and negative pollution going into the ocean. So actually the fight of what's happening in the ocean starts onshore, or may start from the onshore. And the focus on solid waste management is absolutely fundamental for us. Then we are also very active in what concerns renewable energy, offshore wind. And we were amongst the first to develop a new technology of offshore wind, which is the floating offshore wind. There was a demonstration project, one of the first in the world, in front of Viana do Castelo. We provided risk financing for that venture, which, by the way, now is being replicated in other countries, particularly offshore of France. We have provided more than 10 billion euros of finance for offshore wind since 2003, and we continue on that path. Then EIB Blue Invest and Portugal Blue. This is very much about venture capital and equity. And these are facilities which are managed by our subsidiary, the European Investment Fund, using money also from the European Commission. And this aims at supporting startups, early stage companies, with the focus on the blue economy and ocean protection. We signed recently the first transaction under the so-called Portugal Blue with a fund manager called Faber, and for 50 million euros, aiming at mobilizing 85 million euros. And this is actually a partnership between the EIB and the Banco Portuguese de Fomento. Each of us put 25 million euros precisely in order to leverage this total amount of 85 million through equity and quasi-equity money for early stage startups and growth companies. I already mentioned we have a very close collaboration with the European Commission, and we also entered recently into yet another agreement, the Memorandum of Understanding with the Asian Development Bank to foster our transactions also in Asia. And let me turn very, very quickly to the MPAs. And I dare to quote what was released by the European Commission a few years ago about MPAs. MPAs are policy tools for conservation. They are not engines for economic growth, but they can simultaneously deliver conservation and tangible economic benefits. This is a win-win as long as the benefits and their realization do not impede the attainment of conservation objectives. And there should be incentives for businesses to change existing practices or invest in new opportunities. And finally, a large proportion of benefits relate to non-market improvements in societal welfare rather than real economy benefits to sectors. Few studies available conclude that the overall welfare benefits, when non-market benefits are included, of MPAs exceed total costs. Now, from here, what I want to say is, indeed, as was mentioned before by previous speakers, and particularly by Mr. Thompson, what we need to do is to tap sources of revenues that ensure tentatively the self-sustainability financing speaking of MPAs. So this is fundamental. Access fees, penalties in case of bad use of MPAs. I heard the idea of a fee on shipping, to which I could, personally speaking, sympathize. We need to develop other and innovative ways of generating revenues from the use or non-use of MPAs to precisely help the public sector and other entities also of the private sector to manage efficiently and to protect MPAs. This is, for me, absolutely fundamental, and this also will contribute, by the way, to the bankability of the projects around MPAs. Particularly the EIB is a bank, so we do not provide grants. We provide loans, so with an expectation of getting reimbursed. So we look at the cash flow generation capacity of the projects, and we look at the revenue generation of the projects, which may come from different sources, as those that I just mentioned. So this is what I wanted to share with you. I hope that I was not abusive in terms of time.
No, thank you very much, Miguel Morgado from the European Investment Bank. Can I just ask you to stay there for 1 second? Can I ask the team to bring the chairs up? We're going to have a very brief discussion because we only have, I'm told, about 10 minutes left. As we do that, I'm just going to ask you one quick question, and that is, has any, as a bank that effectively tries to crowd in private investment, has, using public funds, has any of the examples that we've been listening today sort of excited you as sort of potential, potential areas where the investment bank, the European Investment Bank, may decide to, invest in?
Yes, I sympathized a lot with the ideas shared by our friend of NOAA, using, for example, carbon credits to feed a junior tranche in layered funds that on the top of these carbon credits attract other sources of funding. This is something that we know how to do. But it's not only a carbon credit. I think that governments should give a very close look to those structures. So layered funds, this means basically for the non-financiers in the room, this means what? This means blending exactly private and public capital, putting capital in a subordinated position, which means that if things go wrong or if the return is not as expected, the first to absorb, so to say, those losses or those lower returns are the funds coming from the public sector. So these structures, as well as risk sharing, by the way, we also enter into facilities, particularly with banks, with commercial banks, where in terms of financing priority projects, environment, sustainability, wastewater management, climate action, adaptation and mitigation, and so on and so forth, we tell the banks, because banks, of course, have scarce capital, so they reflect the use of that scarce capital in their financial conditions, in terms of maturities, in terms of interest rates. So what we do is we provide a sort of guarantee or risk-sharing tranche that enables the banks to enhance, to improve their conditions to the projects which are priority for us.
I'm going to ask, first of all, the three speakers who haven't yet had an opportunity to say something to reflect on what has been said earlier today, and with their own comments, prepared comments in mind, just give us a sense of why and how you think that market mechanisms and financing are going to be really important in trying to build protection and conservation in the ocean in Portugal, particularly in the Selvagens, especially, but also generally, I think. So can I come to you, Zorica Uresovic from the UN World Trade Organization, sorry, UN World Tourism Organization, not to be confused with the World Trade Organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us. Indeed, it would have been nice to share and travel through a journey that we were preparing, but the journey is here. First, thank you as well very much, Ruben and the authorities for inviting us, because this has been a learning process. Now, on your question, I just would like to pick up from my friend Miguel, who just was the last to speak, when he said, and I will capture all on that, lending, blending, advising. We, as a UN organization, we are a development agency. We represent the sector, and you did well to kind of say wrong, because World Trade Organization, because tourism is trade in services. We are the third export earning category in the world after fuel and chemicals in 2019, because the extreme broad value chain of the ecosystem of tourism is extremely important to the world economy, which we have seen during the crisis. 40% of the blue economy is tourism. Tourism is ahead of transport and fisheries. So, Miguel, again, there is no tourism in the support you have. Maybe we can discuss further. But we need to shift and to move from the traditional way we do support countries for transforming and for the transition, for example, towards climate neutrality. The blue economy and blue carbon is going to be definitely part of the equation. Now, from our perspective as an advisory role, leveraging on the power of the UN system and the multilateral system, which we have seen has been extremely efficient during the crisis, we are moving towards creating a UN tourism alliance, leveraging the capacity of all the UN systems present on the ground, driven by one vertical, supporting through tourism, and building a facility which is not going to do just development aid, but aid is going to be part of an ecosystem of blended finance, which we were missing one element which NOAA has, because this new way of tokenizing carbon to transform it in investment to be re-injected for decarbonization and regeneration is certainly one of the best way to go. So this is what I was going to briefly explain, but I think that we're at a point in time where there is a lot of key partners moving into the same direction, and the complementarity of what is available today as well, because the regulation at the COP26 relate very much to the Article 6, which is regulated carbon trading, is all in place. We miss measurement, we miss capacity, we miss the scale, and we work towards that.
Can I just briefly ask you, because of course Ruben spoke about tourism and the Selvagens Islands, as did Paulo, about the importance of tourism in one way or another for the Selvagens and for MPAs generally. I mean, what is the relationship between, mass tourism and the protection of the ocean in places like the Selvagens?
Thank you for the question. I think that I will again speak about Seychelles because in one of my lives I spent 12 years there. And the conservation that has been adopted, I mean, the vision that has been adopted by the government, where 30% of the oceans are protected, I would speak in particular of a very similar, I can say, scenario as Selvagens Islands can be taking. The South Atoll of Aldabra, which is a World Heritage Site, which I strongly encourage you to make the Selvagens Islands a World Heritage space, because it is something that is going to be highly attractive and highly raising the value of the islands, which are fully into conservation, even with their economic zone. That is generating about 30% of the whole resources for marine protection for the whole of Seychelles. Why? Because people are really ready to pay to go to those places. And I think Ruben explained to us on-site and remote, both are possible. I think high-end, high-yield, low impact. That is what we should be looking at. That is one element. But then on the other part, when it comes to the other part of your question, I think that since 3 years, we live differently. And the print of the DNA of how we can change our way of living through the crisis we went through with the COVID is as well impacting very much the way that we perceive the Earth and the planet today. People now want to go to places which are remote, which are pristine, which are far, which are untouched and undiscovered. And I do not think that we will have the same type of flow on mass tourism as you were explaining. It's going to be regulated completely differently. And today, maybe we have the instruments to do that.
Well, that's an optimistic look at it. I do think that there are many challenges. I mean, I live in Asia, and Indonesia has a plan for 10 new Balis, and I'm not entirely sure that 10 new Balis is going to be especially sustainable. But can I just sort of take what you're saying and ask Jose Manuel Marquez from the Sustainability and Marine Environment Department? I mean, how do you see this challenge of using marine protected areas in ways which are going to ensure that they continue to be protected, but also form part of the blue economy in Portugal?
Primeira nota, nós estamos aqui a celebrar os 50 anos da área marinha protegida das Selvagens. Nós estamos simultaneamente a celebrar os 50 anos da conservação da natureza em Portugal, porque a conservação da natureza em Portugal começou como uma área marinha protegida, começou justamente com as selvagens, em sequência de um diploma que passou despercebido neste tempo, a Lei de Bases dos Parques Nacionais e das Reservas Naturais, que foi essa Lei de Bases que enquadrou e que possibilitou a criação da área marinha protegida das Selvagens. Na altura foi constituída uma comissão técnica para criar áreas marinhas protegidas e tinha já uma segunda em marcha, que era a área marinha protegida de Sesimbra, ou a área submarina de Sesimbra. O processo foi interrompido com a Revolução e em 98 nós criámos finalmente a área marinha protegida do Parque Luís Saldanha, que era aquela que já vinha desde esse tempo. Estes dois marcos são importantes. E há um terceiro marco, e aproveito aqui a oportunidade para cumprimentar e para prestar homenagem à então Ministra do Mar, Ana Paula Vitorino, porque ela vai repegar naquilo que tinha sido feito nos anos 70, vai criar uma comissão, não sei se teve consciência disso ou não, mas criou uma comissão que possibilitou ao país estar hoje com capacidade para criar 30% de áreas marinhas protegidas. Estão já designados, enfim, o roteiro está feito, o país, Portugal hoje, está preparado para criar efetivamente 30% de áreas marinhas protegidas de acordo com os compromissos internacionais que estão assumidos. Não estamos em condições para isso, podemos fazê-lo. A questão que se coloca aqui tem sempre a ver com o financiamento de tudo isto. E o financiamento de tudo isto, o Estado não pode ser retirado da equação. Por duas razões fundamentais, e desculpem que começo por aqui a explicar. Por duas razões fundamentais. A primeira é que estamos a falar do domínio público marítimo que pertence ao Estado. E, portanto, o Estado é o principal gestor deste domínio público marítimo. E depois, porque as áreas marinhas protegidas têm para nós um valor geopolítico, ou melhor, geoestratégico interessante, e que esteve presente na criação das Ilhas Selvagens, em que o Estado português chega à frente e compra as Ilhas Selvagens, por questões de afirmação de soberania. E nós hoje temos isso também no nosso mar. Portanto, as áreas marinhas protegidas permitem ao Estado português criar jurisdição mais sólida nas áreas em que exerce soberania, e, sobretudo, nesta enorme plataforma continental estendida que, pela primeira vez, une os três vértices do chamado triângulo estratégico português e temos um chão comum que nos une a todos. Portanto, as áreas marinhas protegidas nisto representam um fator absolutamente decisivo e, por essa razão, o Estado não pode ser retirado da equação de financiamento das áreas protegidas. É suficiente? Respondo, evidentemente que não. E aqui pego apenas na nota que o Ruben falou e que foi aqui também falado, com a questão do turismo remoto. O turismo remoto nas áreas protegidas, no movimento de conservação da natureza, sempre foi muito importante. O primeiro marco na conservação da natureza foi a criação do Parque de Yellowstone, nos Estados Unidos. E o Parque de Yellowstone, nos Estados Unidos, já foi criado por um conjunto de pintores e de fotógrafos que pintaram e fotografaram aquela beleza asfixiante e conseguiram motivar o Congresso a criar aquela área protegida. A questão que se coloca aqui nas áreas marinhas protegidas é esta. Como é que tornamos visível aquilo que é invisível? Seja porque está longe, seja porque não há luz lá. Como é que levamos aos cidadãos? Porque tem que haver uma motivação do público e do povo para que as áreas marinhas protegidas possam ser financiadas, seja por custos diretos do Estado, seja através de todas as formas que aqui foram expostas, taxando companhias, taxando, enfim, criando outro tipo de investimento, que são úteis. Mas é fundamental que as pessoas se apercebam do valor das áreas marinhas protegidas e que lhe deem valor. Nessa razão, por exemplo, e termino com isto, enfim, haveria muito mais para dizer, a DGRM neste momento está com a Universidade Nova e com a DGPM e com o IPMA a patrocinar estágios de final de licenciatura em 3 mestrandos sobre como avaliar os serviços dos ecossistemas marinhos. Porque só avaliando os serviços dos ecossistemas marinhos é que podemos dar um valor e voltar a ter esta questão do capital natural em cima de tudo isto. Porque se nós precisamos de dinheiro, temos que ter a noção que este dinheiro não é cash, é investimento, é capital que nós temos que investir para as gerações futuras. E, portanto, pela esta perspectiva, de capital, de investir para as gerações futuras, perceber e levar à população o conhecimento que é que uma área protegida representa, só assim é que nós conseguimos, enfim, aplicar políticas públicas, porque elas, no fundo, são todas políticas públicas, mesmo aquelas que têm custos indiretos.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I lost the last bit of the translation there. But,
não se percebeu o que eu estava a dizer. Eu estava a dizer que só levando ao conhecimento, conseguindo avaliar quais são os serviços dos ecossistemas marinhos protegidos, fornecidos pelas áreas marinhas protegidas, nós conseguimos levar e demonstrar ao cidadão a utilidade daquelas áreas. E para demonstrar ao cidadão a utilidade daquelas áreas, nós temos que levar ao conhecimento do cidadão o que é que são aquelas áreas. E põe-se aqui uma questão que é como tornar visível aquilo que por natureza é invisível, porque é difícil ver. O cidadão comum nunca vai ter acesso ao Great Meteor a 1000 metros de profundidade ou às selvagens, que embora estejam cá em cima, são longe.
we've just heard, I think, and I don't think too many people would disagree, that there is an important role for the state in the funding of marine protected areas. But equally, and we've just heard this throughout the discussions today, there are plenty of opportunities for the private sector to play a very, very important role, particularly with innovative financing mechanisms that we've been looking at through these. How, from your point of view, from the business sector's point of view, do you see your role in the long-term protection of marine areas in the Madeira region, including the Selvagens?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much to my good friend Ruben and the organizers. I will be extremely brief, knowing the time constraints that we have ahead of us.
Sorry, I forgot to say Roy Garibaldi. I'm sorry, I do apologize.
No problem.
There we go.
The role here of the International Business Center in what regards the economy of the sea can be twofold. First of all, in one topic, because one of the areas within the International Business Center, which is the ship register, which Jörg Molzan has touched on very well before this morning. And indeed, within the International Business Center, this particular sector of activity, the International Ship Register of Madeira, has been, in fact, a success story, particularly in the last 10 years. As I believe it was explained briefly before, we have over 750 merchant vessels already registered in Madeira, flying, therefore, the Portuguese flag. So the Portuguese merchant fleet has become much larger thanks to the development of the International Ship Register of Madeira. We're a small island, but we're a big player in the shipping market at this moment. As a matter of fact, according to the latest official data from the United Nations, Portugal, thanks to the Madeira registry, was ranked at the end of last year as the 14th largest flag in the world. I believe that this year we will be able to move higher up and probably climb a position to become the 13th largest flag in the world. Now, we want to maintain, of course, this success. We want to maintain this growth, but this is very important, without jeopardizing the quality of the fleet, and particularly aligning the ship registry with the European Union Green Deal and the world's really need for a better environmental performance, particularly by merchant vessels. Jörg Molzan very well explained before how the technical criteria or what technical criteria can be applied in accordance with the rating by international agencies involved in this, on how we could create, therefore, here in the Madeira registry and for the vessels registered here, a surcharge for those, let's call them, non-compliant vessels or less compliant vessels. And I believe that this is going to move forward. Of course, we only now need to carefully design how this is going to be financially structured with the Regional Government of Madeira, but the implementation of this green register, if you want to call it, is definitely going ahead. The problem will be what also Jörg referred very quickly in relation to ports, but it also applies to ship registries, which is from the moment that we apply this green concept, of course, the non-compliant vessels will have to make two decisions. The ship owners will have to make two decisions, either to adapt and therefore change the older polluting vessels for newer compliant vessels, or they may not like the surcharge and move into another registry in the European Union where the surcharge does not exist. So here we need really political action at the level of the governments, Portuguese governments first of all, and other governments in the European Union, to make or to convince the European authorities in Brussels to enforce this as a European Union rule, so that we don't have these vessels moving away, let's say, escaping from this surcharge that will be created.
So the International Maritime Organization has been taking a very long time, if all those shippers here might forgive me for saying, for actually agreeing on some sort of carbon pricing mechanism for shipping. Does what you're suggesting have any sort of overlap with the potential carbon pricing mechanism that may be implemented by the IMO?
There could be an overlap. But again, the international rating agencies, which were referred earlier, the criteria that they use to indicate whether a vessel is polluting or not is already a good framework through which we can work with, although that overlapping you're referring to is also possible. Let me also, very briefly, because I know that we're running out of time, very briefly touch on another subject which has to do with the International Business Center and which is also connected and related with the blue economy, which is the fact that the International Business Center provides a very favorable and attractive tax regime for activities around the blue economy. We do have already a significant number of companies operating within the International Business Center, within the blue economy sector, but I believe that we can, the room for growth is bigger. There is a very low corporate tax available for this sort of companies in the blue economy of 5%. And there are also a range of other tax incentives, which I will not explain here in order not to bother you. But the appropriate tax framework is there for these activities to be developed. And I will just finish by saying that one of our goals, this tax regime, by the way, has been approved by the European Union. And next year, Portugal will be renegotiating the regime with the European Union. And one of our goals is that the European Commission may allow and may approve an enhancement of tax incentives for certain economic activities, being one of them precisely activities connected with the blue economy, namely at the level of innovation, research and development.
Thank you very much, Roy. And I do think that one of the things that we discuss a great deal in the World Ocean Summit is just the credibility of this concept of the blue economy. And whether or not really we are heading towards greater sustainability, or whether we're really heading towards just greater levels of activity in the ocean. And I think that the need for being much more rigorous around what standards we apply to assessing the sustainability of our activities in the ocean is something that I think Ruben would agree with. I know, see you nodding, but I certainly, the work that you've been doing and the work that we're talking about today is very much an application in a sense of. We've just got a minute or a few minutes, just really, quick responses if I can. Paulo, can I come to you, because you started everybody off with a fantastic sort of inspiring view of what the Selvagens are and could be. Are you encouraged by some of the discussions that have gone on today around the kind of mechanisms, innovative mechanisms that could be used to help you finance what is a very important marine protected area?
Yes, very quickly. I was thinking exactly about that. I think that the region has to be always financing the baseline of all the structure. We are very good with the traditional way of financing ourselves through tourism, through funding from EEC. This new world, for me, it's a new world. Obviously that we are open to receive everything that this world can do for us. So we are open. And unfortunately, I am a biologist and I lose lots of things here, so I need the help of these people. I just take care of the asset, they can bring the money and the investment.
And it really is an asset. As Peter said, we need marine protected areas like nothing else in so many ways. I mean, just brief comments from each of you. Joe, what are you going to take away from today? What do you think is the key point?
That we need to collaborate. Yeah. As a group, because there's different areas of competency coming together. I think it's also very important that we have to realize that protecting what we have is really important, but for us to get rid of all this excessive carbon, we have to implement new technologies to help accelerating the absorption of the excess that we have. If we start trading on assets that are here today protected, that's not enough. We have to absorb much more, right? So it has to be a mix.
An excellent thought. Ruben, very briefly. I'm just going to go down the line very briefly. What are you taking away? What do you want to take away?
It's what Iran said. Cooperation and and interlinkage with the actors that we have here. Because in the panel, as we said today, we have solutions, like ones from the reef or from the. We have who can lend, who can advise. And bring in a capital in, and the context for also deploying and scaling up those solutions. So we have to cooperate to get to action.
So cooperation seems to be really important. Frederick, your sense.
Yes. Yes, if I have to jump on the cooperation principle, my last slide, we're talking about the GOTS, which is Global Ocean Trust Chain, which is a digital platform to build bridges between politics, investors, R&D, finance, private sector, which it's going to be operated as a platform as a service with decentralized governance model. So this is, I hope, a tool that everybody here will be able to use for empowering that collaboration and scale it up at the necessary speed to make a difference. So.
I look forward to inviting you to the World Ocean Summit in Portugal next year.
I'm here. I'm going to.
You're very briefly in a second, and then finally to Miguel.
So in 1 second, I would say we need somebody to put the puzzle pieces together. I think Fórum Oceano is one of the entities that could do this and maybe translate a little bit to the political decision makers what the different presenters here are doing actually, and then maybe develop a concept. I think what the biggest challenge is that we need to start being concrete now, and from talking about strategies, really come up with concrete strategies, setting targets, and then put these things into action. That's most important.
Thank you, Miguel. The last word.
Yeah, you know, there are lots of concerns about greenwashing, right? And about the credibility of ESG and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I think we should also provide for avoiding these concerns in the blue economy and in the ocean sector. So we should prevent through credible and robust standards blue washing and the Clean Oceans Sustainable Finance Principles, which were subscribed by the EIB and 70 financial institutions across the world, I think set a good path in that direction.
I would agree with that, and I would also add to that and say that really many more financial institutions really need to join the Sustainable Blue Investment Principles. In particular, asset management, the long-term finance really needs to join that, because without asset management at the table, it seems to me, and without sort of much more detailed guidelines as to how asset management could translate principles of sustainability and evidence around sustainability into their decision-making, I think it will be pretty difficult to move forward. But thank you very much. Thank you to everybody here, and I think tremendous insights, and I hope you've all sort of understood the importance of the Selvagens Islands and how potentially it could be financed, and how the private sector could play a role in that. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Agradeço ao Presidente Miguel Albuquerque e ao Secretário-Geral Rubaneiras o convite para participar nesta importante conferência como Final Keynote Speaker e numa conferência que versa sobre áreas marinhas protegidas e que ganha ainda maior relevo por se focar nas Ilhas Selvagens, a maior área marinha protegida do Atlântico Norte com proteção integral. E é com particular agrado que registro a participação de players de especial relevância para o oceano, portugueses em entidades internacionais, mas também estrangeiros que estão aqui a trabalhar connosco. Para além do Dr. Miguel Albuquerque e do Dr. Rubaneiras, permitam-me que destaque o embaixador Peter Thompson, pelo tanto que tem feito pela sustentabilidade azul. Bem como as diversas entidades representadas no painel de oradores, aliás, são N, já não se vê, estão aqui as cadeiras, o leque de entidades que está aqui presente, e todas elas têm contribuído muito para a evolução do conhecimento sobre o oceano. Permitam-me ainda que refira o moderador da sessão anterior, Charles Godard, que por esse mundo fora temos encontrado várias vezes em conferências desta natureza e temos moderado sempre de forma inteligentemente provocatória debates de alto nível.
Muito obrigada, Charles. It's nice to see you again. Welcome to Portugal. Estamos num momento decisivo para o cumprimento dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável da Estratégia das Nações Unidas, particularmente no que concerne ao Objetivo 14, que se debruça sobre o oceano, mas também, como vimos, num cruzamento total com todos os Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável dessa estratégia. A relação de Portugal com o mar é especial. É um país atlântico com uma linha de costa de cerca de 2.500 km, contando com uma das maiores zonas económicas exclusivas do mundo, que se estende por 1,7 milhões de quilómetros quadrados por enquanto, e incluindo uma grande diversidade de ecossistemas de recursos marinhos. O mar será sempre a imagem de Portugal, quer pelo valor histórico das descobertas, quer pelo presente desígnio de gerir, monitorizar e proteger uma área de mar que é de 90% superior à sua área terrestre. Os desafios que se colocam a Portugal em matéria de sustentabilidade da economia azul são significativos, quer por esta dimensão relativa do espaço marítimo, quer também pela sua natureza arquipelágica. O triângulo marítimo português, eu quase diria o Golden Triangle, senhora secretária regional, continente, Madeira e Açores, constitui 51% da superfície das águas marinhas sob jurisdição da União Europeia, com os correspondentes direitos de soberania para efeitos de conservação, gestão e exploração de recursos naturais de solo e subsolo marinhos. Um país como Portugal tem de assumir a sua natureza arquipelágica, o que implica uma coordenação estreita na gestão do Atlântico português entre o Governo Nacional e os governos regionais da Madeira e dos Açores, num mar que é simultaneamente açoriano-madeirense, português e europeu. E estar aqui no Funchal na Madeira é simbólico. A Madeira, como uma sub-área relevante da Zona Económica Exclusiva Portuguesa, tem responsabilidades significativas em aproximadamente 443 mil quilómetros quadrados, mais uma vez por enquanto, quer na sustentabilidade marinha, quer na segurança marítima. O Governo da República, onde tive a honra de ser Ministra do Mar entre 2015 e 2019, durante o meu mandato, como lembrou há pouco o José Manuel Marques, em coordenação com o Governo Regional da Madeira, promoveram a elaboração do primeiro plano de ordenamento do espaço marítimo da União Europeia, que foi aprovado em outubro de 2019. E, de facto, foi esse plano, e é já nesse plano que estão previstas os 30%, a delimitação de 30% do espaço marítimo português como áreas marinhas protegidas, como foi, aliás, compromisso assumido na primeira Conferência dos Oceanos em 2017 nas Nações Unidas. E, assim sendo, são necessários mecanismos de governance que permitam abordagens multidisciplinares com vários níveis territoriais, do global ao local, e que permitam às populações serem envolvidas na concepção e concretização de políticas e, por outro lado, também usufruírem dos benefícios gerados. Isto tem tudo a ver com o financiamento. As populações também se apropriarem de parte dos benefícios gerados. E só uma visão integrada das atividades que têm lugar no oceano e dos seus impactos nos serviços do ecossistema, como está num plano de ordenamento do espaço marítimo, permite uma melhor compreensão das ameaças e das necessidades de uma gestão sustentável. Importa promover a aprendizagem e a partilha de boas práticas sobre como potenciar uma economia azul, encorajar a utilização sustentável dos recursos oceânicos, melhorar a subsistência e o emprego, ao mesmo tempo que se protege a saúde do ecossistema oceânico. Em resumo, é necessário um modelo simultaneamente multiterritorial e multidisciplinar, funcionando através de plataformas multinível que assegurem a gestão integrada dos espaços oceânicos e das áreas costeiras. Aliás, isto foi bastante debatido pelos oradores do painel anterior. E eu também gostaria, e vou tentar fazê-lo de uma forma mais resumida do que aquela que tenho aqui escrita, de sublinhar de forma muito breve, os principais pressupostos e condicionalismos que enquadram o processo técnico e científico do ordenamento do espaço marítimo que foi discutido por vários oradores. Primeiro que tudo, a tridimensionalidade. É a essência da diferença daquilo que se passa no mar relativamente ao planeamento e tudo aquilo que são atividades terrestres. Os oceanos são sistemas tridimensionais e os seres vivos que os colonizam distribuem-se ao longo dos planos e colunas de água, criando uma teia trófica muito complexa que acaba por ligar todos os mares no conceito de oceano global, permitindo a existência de usos diversos ao longo da coluna de água. Não há uma zona para pesca, outra zona para investigação, outra zona para outra coisa qualquer. Há, de facto, a possibilidade esta tridimensionalidade dá a possibilidade de termos uma ocupação do espaço marítimo para além daquilo que é, olhando para o plano, para o plano de superfície de água. Mas também a conectividade. Os ecossistemas têm fronteiras pouco definidas, o que, por um lado, lhe permite um efeito de diluição e dispersão, diminuindo os efeitos da poluição, mas, por outro lado, leva também a que as consequências de uma determinada ação se repercutam a enormes distâncias, afetando ecossistemas longínquos, muito sensíveis. Veja, é disso exemplo, lamentavelmente exemplo, aquilo que são as ilhas de lixo no Pacífico, que são geradas por todo o mundo, e esta conectividade e também o outro ponto que é importante, a complexidade das cadeias tróficas fazem com que, seja, não só nada pode ser no mar, nada pode ser contido num determinado espaço, é impossível, só se tirarmos um baldinho de água é que podemos conter. Para além disso, nada é passível de ser contido no mar, e também a incerteza, e nem é estático, a incerteza que temos, que criam obrigações acrescidas e atenção acrescida a tudo quanto é atos de planeamento ou decisões ligadas com o mar. E, finalmente, referi também os direitos de propriedade. No mar, a propriedade não existe. Mesmo nos espaços marítimos sob jurisdição de um Estado costeiro, os direitos destes não são absolutos, não existindo, por isso, a possibilidade de se dispor de um território marítimo como se ele fosse exclusivo. E isto é o que está previsto na Convenção das Nações Unidas sobre o Direito do Mar. Os aspectos que referi demonstram bem a relevância do ordenamento do espaço marítimo em geral e, em concreto, da importância da delimitação e plano de gestão das áreas marinhas protegidas. Pela dimensão relativa dos recursos ligados ao oceano, a economia do mar deverá representar uma parcela cada vez maior dos PIBs nacionais e regionais e, simultaneamente, constituir-se como fator de coesão dos diversos territórios. A questão central é saber como assegurar a sustentabilidade da economia azul, quer numa perspectiva ambiental, quer na perspectiva financeira. Em Portugal, eu vou referir até 2019, porque 2020 e 2021 enfim, deturpam sempre e vão alterando estes dados. Mas em Portugal, entre 2015 e 2019, o peso da economia azul duplicou, atingindo os 5% do PIB em 2019, quando na maior parte das economias, dos países com economias do mar, este valor não ultrapassa os 3,5%. É isso que existe. Nós, em Portugal, em 2019, atingimos os 5% do PIB, e o que é significativo. É necessário que continue a crescer, não só em Portugal, mas em todos os países costeiros, preservando o oceano, apostando no uso sustentável dos recursos naturais na economia azul, quer nas vertentes tradicionais como o turismo, os portos e o shipping, ou a pesca sustentável e a aquacultura, até às mais emergentes, que já não deveriam ser assim tão emergentes, mas que continuamos, infelizmente, a dizer que são emergentes, como sejam as energias renováveis offshore e a utilização sustentável do capital natural. A forte interação entre os decisores e os centros de investigação e inovação nas áreas da biologia e tecnológicas tem permitido avanços substanciais da economia do capital natural e na economia circular. Aliás, devo referir que boa parte das soluções que foram apresentadas no painel anterior, se fosse há 5 anos, não existiam. Ainda não se tinha produzido conhecimento suficiente para chegarmos ao ponto de se apresentar e, portanto, o que se passou aqui hoje foi altamente inovador em termos internacionais. A forte interação entre os decisores e os centros de investigação e investigação nas áreas da biologia e tecnológicas têm permitido, de facto, estes avanços substanciais e o que é também de sublinhar, e por isso repito esta expressão, é aquilo que é também já a participação e a comparticipação de entidades privadas e entidades que já, para além da sua atividade económica normal, já fazem também investigação e já produzem também avanços na nossa economia. As transições energética e digital e a descarbonização são também determinantes no reforço da sustentabilidade da economia azul. A relevância das energias renováveis oceânicas tornou-se ainda mais evidente com a guerra da Ucrânia. Mas agora, aqui chegados, temos que avançar até porque existem efeitos gravíssimos por todo o planeta fora daquilo que é esta emergência climática, que sublinho que há 2 dias o secretário-geral das Nações Unidas disse que já não estávamos em situação de emergência climática, estamos em situação de crise climática, temos um sinal vermelho relativamente a este tipo de comportamentos que todos nós globalmente temos pelo mundo inteiro. Mas para avançar teremos que tomar consciência que o desenvolvimento económico não é necessariamente sinónimo de desrespeito pela sustentabilidade. Não podemos pôr sustentabilidade de um lado e pôr economia do outro. Temos que assumir, internalizar que não é incompatível, não é nenhum desrespeito pela sustentabilidade. A digitalização e a descarbonização tornam a atividade económica mais competitiva e, simultaneamente, mais verdes. Refiro, por exemplo, iniciativas no âmbito da transição energética de grande envergadura, melhorando a eficiência energética e permitindo a redução e controle das emissões, a digitalização dos procedimentos das operações marítimas e na relação terra-mar, a adoção de todos os aspectos do green shipping que já estão a ser implementadas, com a redução do nível de enxofre ou a utilização de mecanismos de medição de emissões. Temos é que todos ter consciência que não é hoje decidimos que vamos fazer a transição energética no shipping e amanhã estão aí a chegar os navios já com navios verdes, mas temos que ter a noção que se para amanhã navios verdes só se forem pintados, só se for para pintar o casco, porque de facto são transições que demoram tempo e temos que ter aqui uma decalagem. As encomendas que forem colocadas hoje chegam daqui a 2 anos, na melhor das hipóteses. E, portanto, se hoje não houver já as alterações tecnológicas, as encomendas que se coloquem hoje vêm com os combustíveis tradicionais e, portanto, temos que ter aqui uma decalagem e prever desde já. Não temos que esperar pela última moda, mas temos que avançar com o mais green que temos hoje. Nós temos neste campo um novo objetivo climático da UE, a nível económico, de maior redução das emissões até 2030, em consonância com os objetivos do Green Deal, impõe aos agentes económicos um aumento de custos de investimento, mas também oferece um vasto campo de oportunidades. A ambição da neutralidade carbónica é realista, mas implica mudança. O processo de descarbonização consistirá numa autêntica revolução do status quo, com alterações que envolvem desde os procedimentos para a gestão e utilização do oceano até à utilização de combustíveis alternativos com baixo teor de carbono e produzidos através de fontes de energia renovável. Isto é que vai ser um desafio, Sra. Ministra, para nós pormos, nós cidadãos do mundo, termos os navios abastecidos através de energias renováveis. Isso é que vai ser um desafio. As diferentes atividades no mar têm de ser reinventadas. E é este o desafio que se coloca. Descobrir neste processo oportunidades que gerem desenvolvimento económico e, simultaneamente, contribuam para melhorar a saúde humana e dos ecossistemas marítimos e terrestres, contribuindo para a sustentabilidade do planeta, bem como gerar capacidade de a própria economia azul financiar a preservação e recuperação do oceano e das áreas costeiras. O financiamento nunca poderá ser exclusivamente público, porque isso queria dizer que os nossos impostos teriam que aumentar. E nós não estamos disponíveis para que os nossos impostos aumentem e, por isso, de facto, o financiamento não pode ser exclusivamente público e que as atividades de recuperação e preservação devem apropriar-se também das externalidades, de parte das externalidades positivas que são geradas. E, portanto, aqui, eu não sou financeira, mas gostava de ser. Porque para trabalhar de facto, em soluções em que não é aumentar os custos de uma forma geral, que esse investimento gere mais-valias que permita não só ter a retribuição da atividade económica, mas ainda assim até gerar mais-valias que possam investir na preservação e na recuperação. Existem bons exemplos neste sentido, uma base de inovação e sustentabilidade, e as áreas marinhas protegidas e os seus planos de gestão sustentável são um culminar de excelência no processo de ordenamento do espaço marítimo. Para além de protegerem ecossistemas e recursos marinhos, poderão em si mesmo constituir laboratórios para experimentação de atividades não intrusivas. Eu gostei muito da intervenção de todos, mas do Jeroen, não sei se é assim que se pronuncia, Jeroen van der Waal. Mas gostei muito da sua intervenção e eu tinha exatamente aqui preparado 2 exemplos, não com a capacidade, com a profundidade técnica, mas também porque são 2 exemplos em que a preservação e a proteção geram mais-valia económica. A utilização de recifes naturais ou artificiais para nurseries de espécies em risco, o desenvolvimento de organismos necessários à indústria, por exemplo, da saúde ou da beleza, geram mais-valia noutras economias fora das áreas marinhas protegidas e também, como se disse, também na envolvente estas nurseries vão criar mais-valias também na pesca que pode ser feita na envolvente e depois, utilizando a capacidade de conectividade, alargar a toda a área, a toda a zona económica exclusiva. Mas também o teleturismo. Já lhe ouvi aqui chamar muitas coisas, eu chamei de teleturismo. E uma área marinha protegida, como a das selvagens, deve ter proteção integral. Estamos todos de acordo relativamente a isso. Mas merece ser conhecida e divulgada. E então aí as novas tecnologias de informação, de comunicação, tudo isso podem criar plataformas de divulgação daquilo que se passa nas áreas marinhas protegidas e transformar o turismo, transformar um novo conceito do turismo. Como se dizia há pouco alguém, já não sei concretamente qual dos oradores, muitos de nós já não querem ir aos sítios. É porque criamos novos comportamentos no pós-pandemia. Mas poucos de nós querem ser privados do conhecimento desses sítios. Na realidade, a maior parte das pessoas não sabe o que é que se passa nas selvagens. E querem saber e merecem saber, e o turismo, juntamente com a inovação e com a tecnologia, têm que saber criar novos produtos neste sentido. Se eu estiver a fazer mergulho, eu não faço, Deus me livre, mas se estiver a fazer mergulho, eu posso estar a ver, para além do que estou a ver fisicamente, posso ter tecnologias que me permitam comparar com o que se passa nas selvagens ou noutra área protegida desta natureza. Isto são desafios que se colocam também à indústria do turismo e acho que são importantes. E conseguimos o duplo objetivo, aparentemente que é antagónico, é de proteger e simultaneamente usufruir de áreas de elevado capital natural, sem que aconteça aquilo que se passa em muitos sítios, que existe quase uma atitude predatória de todos nós relativamente a estas áreas. Eu gostaria ainda só de referir algumas medidas políticas para a gestão sustentável das áreas marinhas protegidas. De facto, e em resumo, temos de desenvolver uma compreensão clara do estado e das pressões sobre determinados ecossistemas marinhos e costeiros e a probabilidade das AMPs. Eu não sei se esta água está... Pode ser, posso usar? Posso, com certeza. Portanto, como eu ia dizer, a probabilidade das AMPs poderem integrá-los e o leque de stakeholders envolvidos. Não é? Temos aqui uma área marinha protegida, chegamos ao mapa, existem mapas, a Marinha tem cartografia invejável em toda a parte do mundo, diga-se. Não é só chegar e dizer assim, temos aqui um risco em torno das áreas marinhas protegidas, temos que ir mais longe. Quais são a probabilidade de termos, de facto, matéria que justifica e que qual é o leque de entidades que têm que ser envolvidas nesta delimitação e nesta gestão. Definir claramente, de forma mensurável e com limite temporal, os objetivos de cada área marinha protegida, estimar os custos e benefícios esperados das áreas marinhas protegidas, permitindo melhorar a sua eficácia ambiental e económica. Podem ser usadas ferramentas digitais de software, como a criação da digital twins das AMPs para implementar uma gestão mais profissionalizada, desenvolver um plano de gestão da AMP. É impensável ter uma AMP sem um plano de gestão, e este plano de gestão tem que ser um plano de gestão à séria, não é só com os objetivos mensuráveis, mas também com abordagens robustas de monitorização, reporte, conformidade e aplicação. A monitorização dos dados ecológicos e socioeconómicos é importante, inicialmente para definir a linha de base, bem como, posteriormente, avaliar as tendências de desempenho ao longo do tempo. Eu já estou a começar a cortar parágrafos. O reporte, através da criação de bases de dados online nacionais ou regionais com informação disponível ao público, aumenta a transparência e permite a partilha de informações e lições aprendidas em diferentes AMP. As respectivas abordagens de gestão e a sua eficácia na concretização dos objetivos pretendidos. Globalmente, o financiamento adequado da conservação das zonas costeiras e marinhas constitui um grande desafio. As estratégias de financiamento, que incluem a identificação das respectivas necessidades e os instrumentos possíveis através dos quais o financiamento adicional pode ser mobilizado. E, repito, concordo com aquilo que foi dito no painel, que está em causa é o financiamento adicional. Ou seja, não é o financiamento que tem que já ser hoje feito. É o adicional. O adicional é que nos preocupa também, exceto em países em que nós queremos. E o Peter Thompson tem dito isso várias vezes, é que nós estamos a falar num mundo desenvolvido, em que o know-how existe, pode não existir alguma capacidade de financiamento, mas o know-how existe e já estão a ser feitas muitas coisas. Outra coisa é o que se passa em alguma parte do mundo em que não existe nem conhecimento, nem instrumentos para fazer, nem dinheiro para o financiar. Ora, quando nós queremos salvar o planeta, não é só para salvar o hemisfério norte, certo? Também temos que salvar o hemisfério sul, se com o prejuízo de não salvarmos hemisfério nenhum. E isto tem que ser ponderado também das questões de financiamento e temos que, de facto, ir mais além para identificar as fontes. Também é preciso criar um mix de políticas eficazes que integram toda a gama de pressões sobre a biodiversidade marinha. As EMPs são efetivamente uma componente crucial da proteção marítima, mas não são suficientes para garantir que o objetivo ambiental mais amplo seja atingido. Bem, podemos pensar em políticas para o mar, se não pensarmos em políticas de proteção em terra que permitam, na interação, não prejudicar o mar não conseguimos atingir objetivo nenhum. É necessário um pacote abrangente de medidas políticas para assegurar a utilização sustentável dos recursos marinhos. Incorporar, finalmente, as questões da concepção das AMPs noutras abordagens políticas, tais como o ordenamento espacial marítimo, mas também no ordenamento espacial terrestre têm que ser integradas estes ordenamentos. E todas as partes interessadas têm que assegurar uma melhor compreensão dos custos e benefícios das decisões para diferentes utilizadores. Isto são critérios mínimos para definir os planos de gestão e acho que estão assim, aqui a ser aplicados, mas temos que criar um roteiro de construção de planos de gestão das áreas marinhas protegidas, sob pena de onde forem, assim, cada um tenha a sua opinião e vá fazendo umas coisas e todos acham que têm áreas marinhas protegidas. Aliás, devo dizer que por esse mundo fora, algumas vezes enfim, achei caricato, achei curioso, deu-me vontade de rir, a apresentação de algumas áreas marinhas protegidas e depois ia saber, era o tal desenho no mapa e não era mais do que isso, mas isto não pode ser assim. De facto, nós temos que ter um roteiro e devemos, e desafio este fantástico grupo e desafio o Fórum Oceano para fazer uma standardização que... Estou a ver ali o meu antigo chefe de gabinete. Que maravilha, Sr. Almirante. Para fazer um roteiro de aquilo que devem ser os indicadores, os procedimentos, tudo aquilo que é um manual de gestão das áreas marinhas protegidas. Os 50 anos de conservação das ilhas selvagens, bem como o plano de gestão da sua área marinha protegida, deverão ser transformados num case study de referência a nível internacional. Senhora Ministra da Defesa, Senhor Dr. Miguel Albuquerque, tem aqui a joia da coroa. E, de facto, os dois em conjunto, e o Senhor Secretário de Estado do Mar, com certeza, podem e devem apresentar a nível internacional este caso, que é um caso de estudo e pode ser apresentado como um caso de referência, e isso valoriza não só as áreas marinhas protegidas, esta em concreto, mas também a Madeira e Portugal. E que eu considero que cada vez que a comunidade oceânica internacional se reúne e discute com seriedade, como foi o caso, a sustentabilidade do oceano, o mundo fica mais rico em conhecimento e damos um passinho no sentido de proteger o desenvolvimento sustentável do oceano e do planeta. Saibam os decisores políticos, designadamente o Governo da República, os governos das regiões autónomas, o tecido económico e cada um de nós, cidadãos, não nos ponhamos, nenhum de nós se ponha de fora, aproveitar esta mais-valia e passarmos a ter diferentes níveis e comportamentos mais sustentáveis. As emissões de CO2 após a pandemia tiveram um aumento de 6%. Cresceu a economia, aumentou a poluição. O desafio aqui desta inteligência concentrada que temos nesta sala é passar a ter mais economia, mais desenvolvimento económico e menos poluição. É que, se não o soubermos fazer, assumiremos na nossa era o papel de meteorito que acabou com os dinossauros. Só que desta feita é mais grave, pelo menos na nossa perspectiva, é que não é com os dinossauros que acaba, é mesmo com a humanidade. E por isso é bom que tenhamos todos consciência disso e quando sairmos de casa de manhã e entrarmos no automóvel, devíamos pensar nessas matérias. É por isso essencial continuar a apostar na criação de conhecimento e inovação que ajudem a delinear o caminho. Em nome da Autoridade da Mobilidade dos Transportes, que é um regulador independente, mas muito participativo, assumo o compromisso de contribuir para o financiamento da investigação científica na área do mar, através de prémios e de bolsas de investigação. Nós já contribuímos todos os anos com cerca de 4 milhões de euros para o Fundo Ambiental. Agora, gostaríamos que, de facto, e isto também é um desafio aos senhores membros do Governo que estão aqui presentes, é que aquilo que cada entidade contribui para o Fundo Ambiental, se soubesse qual é o destino. Isto é, eu gostaria de saber todos os anos, desses 3, 4 milhões de euros que a autoridade contribui para o Fundo Ambiental, onde é que vão parar? Ou seja, não pode haver aqui, vai tudo para o mesmo bolo e depois vamos todos barganhar para ver onde é que vai parar cada uma das parcelas. Não. gostaria de saber, de facto, que houvesse algum financiamento dedicado. E nós estamos disponíveis, a autoridade, esta autoridade não vive do Orçamento de Estado, nem poderia viver, senão não seria um regulador independente, e temos receitas maiores que as nossas despesas. E por isso temos alguma disponibilidade para efetivamente contribuir para a sustentabilidade financeira, não é do setor, não é toda esta área, mas é pelo menos da investigação e do aumento e da consolidação do conhecimento nesta área. Também estamos igualmente disponíveis para participar e promover iniciativas de reflexão sobre os transportes, nomeadamente os transportes marítimos, em sentido amplo, na região autónoma da Madeira, tal como estamos a fazer neste mês de setembro, em conferências que organizámos ontem no Porto e na próxima semana em Lisboa, em parceria com os municípios e as respectivas áreas metropolitanas e também com o Governo. Por isto tudo, julgo que não falhou nada em termos de final note, final note speaker. Desejo a todos, especialmente ao Governo da Madeira e ao Governo da República e à Marinha Portuguesa, que continuem o excelente trabalho que têm feito. Nós, de facto, nunca nos sentimos envergonhados por esse mundo de fora em matéria do mar português, que também é madeirense, que também é açoriano, que também é europeu e que, acima de tudo, é o mar de todo o planeta. Muito obrigado, bem-aja e bom trabalho.
Em 1648 houve um tratado, que foi o Tratado de Westfália, que definiu os Estados-nações e as fronteiras. Ainda hoje estamos a discutir essas fronteiras, como sabem. Aliás, há um conflito em curso. 334 anos depois, houve uma lei do mar, em 1982, que tentou definir as fronteiras marítimas. Na minha perspectiva, como militar, mas também como cidadão português, o que me preocupa é precisamente a definição das fronteiras e a capacidade que temos para controlar essas fronteiras em termos internacionais. Há conflitos dessas fronteiras marítimas no Mar da China, no Mar de Azov, no Mar Negro, no Ártico e em muitos outros sítios em que já se está a desconstruir o modelo do UNCLOS. E isso, quando falamos em áreas marinhas protegidas, deve ser uma consideração. A primeira tarefa que nós temos quando uma sociedade quer usar o mar é ter a propriedade desse mar e ter a capacidade de se apropriar desse mar. Isso faz parte da área militar ou área da defesa. No entanto, depois de se apropriar do mar, tem uma outra dificuldade, que é estruturar esse mar para fazer atividades e desenvolver, e pode ser através da segurança, de obrigar a que a lei seja respeitada nesse mar, o salvamento marítimo das pessoas que estão a atuar no mar, a proteção ambiental. Portanto, todas essas áreas nós conceptualizamos na Marinha como área de segurança em termos lados. E depois, o mar tem que servir também para qualquer coisa, e a economia azul e o desenvolvimento, em que a Marinha também participa com a ciência, com a pesquisa científica que faz, com a logística que faz. Por exemplo, nesta região e nestas ilhas, nas Ilhas Selvagens, julgo que sem a Marinha dificilmente a logística que é necessária era sustentável, ou pelo menos sustentável da forma que está a ser. Portanto, todos estes contributos fazem com que a nossa visão da Marinha seja de uma Marinha holística que, uma vez que o Estado investe recursos imensos numa Marinha que é militar e que depois desenvolve capacidades, nós desenvolvemos essas capacidades que podem ser militares, mas também podem ser usadas em ambiente não militar e, portanto, nós chamamos nas missões tipicamente não militares. Como podem ver, nós usamos a palavra marinha, já não usamos a palavra marinha de guerra. Isso foi uma mudança que fizemos há cerca de 20 anos e foi uma mudança muito objetiva, porque nós vemos-nos como uma marinha holística, que tem muito mais coisas para dar e fazer do que a parte pura militar, apesar da parte pura militar ser a nossa razão de existência. Através do desenvolvimento científico, através de inovação tecnológica, através de incentivar a cultura marítima e o uso do mar e a perspectiva que o mar vai ser ocupado e os seres humanos vão viver no mar de forma permanente e não de forma nómada como estão a fazer. É uma questão de tempo. É a última fronteira da Terra, temos a certeza absoluta que ela vai ser ocupada. Vamos ver se não fazemos as asneiras que fizemos na área terrestre seca, se não fazemos, se não poluímos, se conseguimos fazer isto de forma sustentável, mas não nos esquecemos que nestas áreas, que são áreas protegidas, antes de tudo e na base de tudo está a posse do mar. Essa posse hoje está a ser discutida. Está a ser discutida de forma violenta em certos casos. E, portanto, a Marinha Portuguesa, a defesa, terá sempre um papel importante e relevante nisto, como todas as outras marinhas e todas as outras. Quem julgar que a lei internacional é suficiente para garantir os nossos direitos, que durma descansado, que depois um dia vai acordar muito preocupado. Muito obrigado e passo já ao próximo ponto.
É com muito gosto que participo neste evento dedicado a um tema tão importante quanto atual. A sustentabilidade dos espaços marítimos, em paralelo com a sua valorização, regeneração e devida proteção, pode e deve permanecer um objetivo constante na nossa agenda. Gostaria, por isso, de agradecer aos organizadores desta conferência, assim como ao Sr. Presidente do Governo Regional da Madeira, por promoverem uma discussão tão oportuna e por possibilitarem a partilha do contributo da defesa nacional nesta área em geral e em relação à área marinha protegida da Reserva Natural das Ilhas Selvagens, em particular. A gestão responsável dos oceanos, nas suas múltiplas funções, requer equilíbrios entre desenvolvimento económico e sustentabilidade ambiental, entre o exercício de direitos soberanos de cada Estado e as responsabilidades inerentes a este bem comum da humanidade. O papel da defesa nacional para um mar mais seguro pode e tem-se desenrolado das mais variadas formas. Por exemplo, através do investimento em matéria espacial, com vista a permitir a observação de fenómenos no mar em apoio à atividade operacional, incluindo na vigilância das áreas marinhas protegidas ou no combate às atividades ilegais no mar. A participação nacional no projeto Space Surveillance and Tracking representa um caso evidente de sinergias civis-militares com considerável potencial nesta área. Mas os estímulos à economia do mar são igualmente relevantes, com base no desenvolvimento de um cluster naval e projetos de inovação tecnológica de cariz internacional. Portugal possui vários exemplos de relevo neste âmbito. A Academia do Arsenal, lançada há cerca de ano e meio, fará a diferença na constituição de mais e melhor conhecimento naval, contribuindo para o cumprimento do objetivo da componente do mar no plano de recuperação e resiliência. A Academia foi igualmente escolhida em abril pela NATO para acolher um acelerador de inovação no âmbito do programa Diana. Temos também diversos programas e projetos a nível europeu, como o MUSAS, um projeto de veículos autónomos não tripulados para a guerra antissubmarina, liderado por Portugal no âmbito da cooperação estruturada permanente da União Europeia. Importa ainda destacar o desenvolvimento do Centro de Operações de Defesa do Atlântico e da Plataforma Naval, no âmbito do PRR, que permitirá ajudar a preservar a saúde dos oceanos, defender o meio e o território, proteger as cadeias de valor das diversas indústrias oceânicas e reforçar a capacidade operacional e científica do país. Mas muito embora as responsabilidades da defesa nacional enquanto área de soberania se estendam a todo o território nacional, elas assumem um especial impacto nas regiões autónomas. Com efeito, a sua natureza arquipelágica exige-nos uma presença distinta, mas não menos relevante, através de um apoio ainda mais próximo às populações e de um exercício ainda mais regular de soberania. Esse exercício revela-se constante e necessário, mas também adaptável face à evolução de desafios e ameaças que coloquem em causa tais missões. Entendemos essa responsabilidade de forma muito empenhada. Deixei esse compromisso bem claro quando visitei a região autónoma dos Açores na semana passada e reafirmo aqui de novo na Madeira. A defesa nacional é e continuará a ser um parceiro imprescindível nas regiões autónomas, proporcionando um contributo muito importante para a sua segurança e desenvolvimento em articulação próxima com os órgãos regionais. São conhecidos os resultados alcançados a nível da busca e salvamento e de evacuações aeromédicas. Mas destacaria hoje o trabalho que a Autoridade Marítima Nacional tem vindo a desempenhar, em coordenação com variadas entidades regionais e locais, para assegurar o cumprimento da lei nos espaços marítimos e o regular funcionamento das atividades ligadas ao mar. Saúdo, em particular, a estreita colaboração com o SANAS, a Associação Madeirense para Socorro no Mar, que tem sido fulcral para garantir a segurança de todas e todos os que utilizam o mar como profissão ou para atividades de lazer. A relação intrínseca entre a Defesa Nacional e a região autónoma da Madeira sobressai de forma ainda mais evidente quando consideramos o espaço geográfico hoje aqui em debate, nomeadamente, enfim, os 2.677 km² que compõem a maior área marinha protegida da Europa e de todo o Atlântico Norte, numa área de 12 milhas náuticas ao redor da Reserva Natural das Ilhas Selvagens. Queremos replicar esta experiência para outras áreas marinhas nacionais, um propósito, aliás, em linha com os Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável das Nações Unidas e devidamente expresso pelo seu Primeiro-Ministro em Lisboa, a quando da abertura da segunda Conferência dos Oceanos, coorganizada por Portugal e pelo Quénia em junho. Estamos cientes do potencial geoestratégico que este espaço da Reserva Natural das Selvagens representa, da importância dos recursos naturais existentes no seu mar, conhecidos e ainda por descobrir, bem como da necessidade de preservação do seu património natural, extremamente rico e diversificado. Esta vasta área acarreta claramente responsabilidades acrescidas em termos de projeção de uma capacidade efetiva. O Estado está já consideravelmente presente através, por exemplo, do Instituto das Florestas e Conservação da Natureza, que realiza um trabalho muito importante de proteção do ambiente. Mas gostaria de aproveitar esta oportunidade para enfatizar o investimento que o Governo, com ampla participação da Defesa Nacional, tem devotado à melhoria significativa da capacidade de vigilância e monitorização das Ilhas Selvagens nos últimos anos, reforçando o exercício de soberania nacional neste território. Desde 2017, foi possível à Autoridade Marítima Nacional edificar novas infraestruturas nas ilhas, com o apoio da Marinha e de outras entidades, como a Secretaria Regional do Ambiente e Recursos Naturais, o Instituto das Florestas e Conservação da Natureza, a Direção Regional do Equipamento e Conservação e a Força Aérea Portuguesa. Estas infraestruturas permitiram, por sua vez, as condições logísticas e os requisitos técnicos necessários para assegurar a presença em permanência 365 dias por ano, 24 horas por dia, de 2 agentes da Polícia Marítima e de um militarizado da Marinha do Troço do Mar, reforçando a equipa composta por 2 vigilantes do Instituto das Florestas e Conservação da Natureza. Estas equipas passaram a contar com sistemas de comunicação e radar melhorados, de modo a assegurar uma vigilância num perímetro de cerca de 20 milhas, com o apoio de 2 lanchas da Polícia Marítima e com visita regular de navios patrulha da Marinha Portuguesa. Este esforço combinado só foi possível devido à aplicação de um modelo sustentável e criterioso, quer ao nível financeiro, quer em termos de gestão de recursos humanos e de manutenção dos meios navais envolvidos. A Autoridade Marítima Nacional e a Marinha continuam a encetar esforços adicionais para dotar a Reserva Natural das Ilhas Selvagens das condições necessárias para garantir uma vigilância eficaz. Esse mesmo investimento será reforçado este mês através da intervenção na rampa de acesso ao mar na Selvagem Grande, com o objetivo de aumentar a capacidade operacional dos recursos aí existentes. Esta valorização de condições invariavelmente difíceis e remotas, mas fundamentais para o exercício da missão que compete à Defesa Nacional, é um aspecto que gostaria de destacar. Através do posto de comando local da Polícia Marítima nas Selvagens, tem sido assim possível manter a vigilância e fiscalização da Reserva Natural. Tal tem passado pelo recurso a sistemas de informação e vigilância eletrónica que concorrem para a fiscalização de navios e embarcações que acedem ao espaço marítimo sob jurisdição nacional. Os números falam por si. Desde 2017, ano em que foi inaugurada a capacidade operacional da Autoridade Marítima Nacional nas Ilhas Selvagens, tiveram lugar um total de 152 ações de fiscalização, 15 das quais já a decorrer desde 2022. De igual forma, nos últimos 5 anos, foram realizadas 2.703 ações de monitorização, 320 das quais em 2022. É, pois, possível quantificar como uma presença permanente em terra pode contribuir de forma direta para a segurança e proteção dos espaços marítimos circundantes. Mas não podemos esquecer o papel importante que é também desempenhado ao nível da prevenção e repressão da pesca ilegal, no patrulhamento às áreas protegidas, no registro e reporte do sobrevoo por aeronaves a baixa altitude, no registro e reporte de todos os navios de investigação, bem como de navios militares estrangeiros, nomeadamente os que operem no mar territorial ou na zona económica exclusiva, e no registro diário das condições meteorológicas e oceanográficas observadas. Em tudo o que fazemos, temos mantido uma preocupação com a sustentabilidade da nossa ação, procurando assegurar que o impacto no ecossistema circundante seja mínimo e consciente. Efetivamente, para além da segurança, a defesa encontra-se empenhada na salvaguarda do ambiente e na promoção das melhores práticas ambientais. Assim se compreende que os melhoramentos efetuados nas instalações nas selvagens tenham recebido o 26º Prémio da Defesa Nacional e Ambiente em virtude da prioridade atribuída à sustentabilidade ambiental. Precisamos agora de promover uma melhor partilha do conhecimento científico sobre áreas como o espaço, a observação da atmosfera, os oceanos, as alterações climáticas e a energia, como forma de ancorar uma economia azul em condições inovadoras, mas também seguras. Em todos estes domínios, daremos o nosso contributo com vista à proteção e salvaguarda dos oceanos, cientes da responsabilidade que a sua preservação para gerações vindouras nos impõe. De forma a garantir a utilização segura e o desenvolvimento associado ao mar, o entrosamento entre a defesa e as populações locais permanece um objetivo político cimeiro. Quero, por isso, saudar a disponibilidade do Governo Regional para o apoio e colaboração na realização destas iniciativas relativamente às Ilhas Selvagens e de outras que certamente se seguirão. Da nossa ação conjunta da defesa nacional e das autoridades e parceiros regionais, estou certa que resultará um exercício regular de soberania do Estado que permitirá assegurar a sustentabilidade dos ecossistemas marítimos em articulação com o desenvolvimento económico que as atividades ligadas aos oceanos geram. Muito obrigada a todos e parabéns por esta iniciativa.
Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, permitam-me em primeiro lugar cumprimentar a senhora Ministra da Defesa e dizer a Vossa Excelência, nunca é demais reafirmar, a consideração e o respeito que o povo da Madeira tem pelos 3 ramos das Forças Armadas e o trabalho notável que desenvolvem nesta região, em cooperação com os órgãos regionais, em todas as áreas dentro de sua intervenção. Tem sido um trabalho imprescindível e fundamental. Por isso queria reafirmar a Vossa Excelência quão importante tem sido e continua a ser o papel das Forças Armadas dos 3 ramos na Madeira. Muito obrigado pela sua presença. Gostaria também de saudar o Sr. Secretário de Estado do Mar e lhe dizer que estou muito satisfeito com o seu desempenho no Governo, porque Vossa Excelência, como eu, foi um autarca eminente e, nesse sentido, o trabalho que temos desenvolvido em conjunto na área do mar tem sido um trabalho muito útil, muito pragmático e muito objetivo. E vamos continuar a trabalhar, Sr. Secretário de Estado. Muito obrigado também por estar hoje aqui presente. Gostaria de cumprimentar o Sr. Almirante Gouveia Melo e dizer que Vossa Excelência tem toda a razão. Não basta a ocupação de jure, é fundamental a ocupação de facto, ou a presença física. E nesse sentido,
a decisão que foi tomada na sequência da intervenção que fizemos no Conselho de Estado de assegurar a presença da autoridade marítima nas selvagens foi uma decisão muito inteligente e muito importante para a salvaguarda desta joia da coroa, deste património da humanidade. E a autoridade marítima e a presença da autoridade marítima desde 2017 nas selvagens tem sido muito importante para acautelar os comportamentos predatórios e muitas vezes até selváticos de pesca ilegal, de distribuição dos habitats que estavam a ser levados a efeitos nestas nossas ilhas. Muito obrigado, Sr. Almirante. Gostaria também, se me permitem, cumprimentar a senhora doutora Ana Paula Vitorino, a minha querida amiga, fez uma intervenção excelente, inteligente, como sempre, e tem toda a razão. A sustentabilidade das ações económicas são perfeitamente compatíveis com o desenvolvimento económico. Temos é que ser inteligentes e saber desenvolver a nossa economia sem pôr em causa aquilo que é essencial, que é o meio ambiente e o meio e os ecossistemas. E nesse sentido, eu gosto sempre de sublinhar que há duas características fundamentais na economia moderna que são parceiros decisivos para isso. Um deles é a desmaterialização, ou seja, a economia moderna exige menos recursos e menos energia para atingir determinadas ações. Ou seja, os recursos que são consumidos, que a desmaterialização das ações é importantíssimo. Ou seja, a tecnologia em si, o desenvolvimento tecnológico é um dos principais motores da sustentabilidade. E outro, obviamente, é a densidade. Ou seja, conseguimos melhores resultados com menos energia e menos recursos. Portanto, acho que a sua intervenção foi muito inteligente e concordo integralmente com a mesma. Mr. Ambassador Peter Thompson, it's a pleasure to receive you here. And in behalf of the region, I have to say thank you. Thank you for your fantastic work defending the sea and the future of mankind. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And you have to continue to help you because this area belongs not to us, belongs to the future generations and for mankind. And we need your knowledge and your influence to have the partnership in scientific partnership to develop and to study this fantastic area that we have now, Maltecan area. Thank you very much. Só queria-vos dizer, portanto, para concluir nesse amassador, duas ou três coisas. Em primeiro lugar, eu acho que é importante dizer e, sobretudo, reafirmar que o desenvolvimento económico deve estar centrado sempre na preservação do meio ambiente. Só pessoas poucas inteligentes e povos incivilizados é que hoje acham que se pode assegurar o futuro da economia destruindo os habitats, destruindo os ecossistemas. Portanto, tudo isso são visões ultrapassadas do desenvolvimento económico que não têm cabimento nas sociedades modernas e civilizadas. E há hoje, e sobretudo, uma grande sensibilização para uma circunstância que é a nossa última fronteira, a fronteira mais desconhecida, que é o mar, estar no centro hoje do combate às alterações climáticas, que são uma evidência, à recuperação e proteção dos ecossistemas e, obviamente, à manutenção da biodiversidade. Nós temos um imperativo moral de legar às novas gerações, aos nossos netos, nossos bisnetos, um mundo melhor do que aquele que recebemos. E, sobretudo, eles têm o direito, que é um direito que nós temos que assegurar aos nossos filhos, aos nossos netos, aos nossos bisnetos, têm o direito de observar o mundo, quando mergulham no mar, ver os peixes, ver as algas, ver a diversidade do mundo biológico e dos ecossistemas, que é algo notável. E, nesse sentido, relativamente à política do mar, é fundamental tomar decisões. E porquê que estas decisões não são tomadas? Vamos ser francos e objetivos. Grande número de decisões não são tomadas porque não se enquadram nos ciclos eleitorais. Ou seja, a política de investimento na ciência, como é uma política que tem repercussões alguns anos depois, é muito mais fácil tomar decisões políticas com impacto imediato no mundo mediático a curto prazo do que tomar decisões como estas que têm um impacto no num horizonte temporal mais lato. E, nesse sentido, acho que esta decisão que nós tomamos, eu digo nós, porque esta decisão da ampliação da reserva das selvagens foi uma decisão que foi tomada por nós, com o apoio do governo português, com o suporte da ONU e da National Geographic. E acho que foi uma decisão, março de 22, fica na nossa história. Porque somos o país europeu que neste momento temos reserva marítima maior do Atlântico Norte. Eu acho que isto nos enche de orgulho e deve-nos encher de orgulho. E o que é que temos neste momento? Temos uma área que prestigia a região, prestigia o nosso país e prestigia a Europa. E nós temos, neste momento, nós somos um exemplo. Portanto, aquele é complexo, temos de estar sempre atrás dos outros, eu não tenho nenhum complexo deste. Neste momento nós estamos na vanguarda e na liderança das áreas protegidas no nosso país. E temos que continuar a avançar. O que é que vai acontecer? Em primeiro lugar, permitam-me-vos dizer que este não é um processo que começou agora. As selvagens é reserva. Foi declarada a reserva desde 1971 e eu penso que a par dos Jerez, não sei se são os Jerez, que em 71 foram as primeiras reservas, em 1971. Depois, em 1976, fica sob a gestão do Parque Natural da Madeira, e hoje Instituto de Conservação. E há aqui dois aspectos importantes. É que é declarada a reserva às Ilhas Selvagens, mas há um trabalho, para além do isolamento, há um trabalho notável que é desenvolvido fundamentalmente pelos guardas e pelos homens e mulheres que trabalharam naquela área. E é preciso lembrar que todo o trabalho de depuração, tirar as espécies invasoras, retirada de ratos, tudo um trabalho ciclópico que foi feito com escassos recursos e com o pessoal que ficava isolado naquelas ilhas durante semanas e semanas sem ver a família. Portanto, eu acho que nós temos que fazer hoje aqui uma homenagem e pedir uma salva de palmas a todas as gerações de guardas e pessoas que trabalham naquela área. Portanto, as coisas não acontecem por acaso. Não acontecem por acaso. E a verdade é que hoje os habitats, a fauna, a flora, a avifauna das selvagens estão num estado de conservação excepcional. E daí a National Geographic ter considerado como área pristina. E é um exemplo único no Atlântico. Portanto, nós temos que nos orgulhar da decisão que tomamos e, neste momento, o que nós temos que fazer é perceber a repercussão internacional desta decisão e o que é que temos que fazer no futuro. Em primeiro lugar, temos que promover com os nossos parceiros internacionais a existência desta área como um exemplo daquilo que se deve fazer. Porque, através desta decisão, nós garantimos a proteção dos últimos ecossistemas pristinos do Atlântico Norte. Em segundo lugar, nós temos aqui uma plataforma de excelência para estudo avançado sobre regeneração de espécies, estudos sobre a preservação dos ecossistemas marinhos, estudos sobre o aquecimento global, estudos sobre a monitorização, estamos a falar de estudos de monitorização, ensaios sobre a acidez dos oceanos, que é um problema que nós temos que enfrentar, muito grave para a humanidade. Poluição marinha, substituição e regeneração dos estoques de pescado e nestes ecossistemas protegidos. Nós, através da monitorização desta área protegida integral, temos a possibilidade de calcular em que velocidade é que se dá a regeneração, em que velocidade é que os estoques são repostos. E se eventualmente estas podem ser consideradas zonas de desova ou de dinamização de determinadas espécies como área protegida. Temos também a possibilidade de estudar de uma forma integrada, como hoje se diz, a velocidade de recuperação e as dinâmicas de recuperação dos processos ecológicos. Por outro lado, nós, como a Ana Paula disse, nós através desta decisão temos, de facto, e estamos na vanguarda para atingirmos os 30% das áreas protegidas consoante é desenho e nós, neste momento, não, somos um exemplo nesta área. O que é que que é fundamental. E aí temos também uma questão que foi suscitada também pela Ana Paula Vitorino: como é que nós vamos proteger esta área? Como é que nós vamos mobilizar os recursos científicos para perceber, monitorizar e salvaguardar este património? Evidentemente, através das parcerias com instituições científicas a nível mundial, das mais prestigiadas, através dos recursos, está ali a nossa vice-reitora da universidade, das universidades nacionais e internacionais, das fundações, dos institutos internacionais. E porquê? Porque nós não estamos a falar aqui apenas de uma área nacional, nós estamos a falar aqui de um património que é da humanidade. E sendo da humanidade, é da atual geração e das futuras gerações. Portanto, nós temos neste momento que fazer um conjunto de operações, a palavra é feia, mas eu vou utilizá-la, de marketing benéfico, não é aquele para vender banha de cobra, no sentido de sensibilizar as instituições científicas do mundo para a importância de apoiarem, de participarem connosco na cogestão e, sobretudo, no desenvolvimento das investigações que são feitas nestas áreas. Portanto, queria dar os parabéns ao Ruben, está muito bem organizado, a todos os participantes, mais uma vez agradecer às sucessivas gerações de guardas das selvagens e agradecer a vossa presença e dizer que hoje e sobretudo a partir de março de 22, Portugal está na vanguarda, estamos na linha da frente, temos que continuar a trabalhar juntos para atingir novamente e melhorar esta área única, singular, que é nossa e é património único a preservar. Muito obrigado.